It's my pleasure now to introduce another book author. Emmett and I kept in touch, I think, on social media is where we first connected, and I had the pleasure of going out to Drumcondra one night to a pub for what I thought was a small chat about what Marxism is all about, and I think we sat there for how many hours? I was red-pilled about Marxism, and I said we need to get this out to our conference when we have this. So I invited Emmett to come and speak. He's written The Red Pandemic, the Global Marxist Cult, and he's going to give an overview of what Marxism is, but also how it can brainwash children, because as you saw from Eugene's presentation, that is what's coming in the schools. So welcome, Emmett. And you don't have your books today, they've sold out, but you have some on order, is that right?
Thank you very much, I appreciate that. Thanks to Jana and the Natural Women's Council for making today possible despite the adversity and change in the venues due to the Marxist brats. So the reason we're all here, to cut straight to the chase, is that we have a serious problem in Irish society with brainwashing. It's activist brainwashing, and it goes by many different labels, progressivism, liberalism, etc. But really what it is Marxist activism. This group, I don't know what, it could be in the hundreds of thousands, maybe a million, maybe more, we don't really know, are responsible for driving all these crazy changes, including what's in the education system. To define what Marxism is, it's an internationalist revolutionary movement that seeks to destroy society or transform society to rebuild it as a Marxist one. They have this notion that oppression is bad, it's suffering, and that they can somehow remove this suffering from society. But we all know as individuals in this room that suffering is a part of life. Trying to remove it is artificial and is fantasy, but that doesn't stop them from trying. Of course, they're not known for being attached to reality. Radical sex ed, trans ideology, etc., drag queen story time, they're all just symptoms of the problem. Marxism is much bigger than that. You actually see on the cover of the book, if you look at the different symbols, mass immigration with the boat people, the trans symbol, you see the plate with the leaf on it on the left, that's veganism, the attack on the traditional family, you name it, the UN, the EU, the whole COVID fiasco, and the climate change movement down the bottom right. The upside down cross is anti-Christianity. Marxism is responsible for all of that. So my kind of strategy is, let's not go after one particular issue, but go after the root cause of all this, which is the ideology and the brainwashing itself. Many of those sub-agendas or initiatives that I talk about are based on the class struggle concept within Marxism, which is very old. It goes back to the 1800s and even beyond that. Originally it was about the rich versus the poor, or the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, as outlined in the Communist Manifesto of 1848. The idea that one group is controlling the other group and making them suffer for their own ends. And feminism is quite old too, the idea that men are oppressing women, etc. In the 20th century it evolved, as Eugene pointed out as well, with postmodernism and critical theory, is the class struggle concept being applied to other things, even crazy things, like now they're trying to convince us that we are oppressing the planet. So the planet has feelings and needs a cuddle, that kind of thing. So this oppression-free society is just a fantasy, and they use these terms like compassion, care, solidarity, equality, diversity, equity as well, which is the enforcement of artificial equality, and they're all a type of emotional manipulation. They appeal to that kind of sense we all have to look after other people, which is natural, and that's a good thing about life. But Marxism co-opts that and uses it to further its own agenda of revolution. Marxism doesn't care about, you know, the women or the foreigners or the animals or black people with BLM. It's all fake. It's just uses groups as useful idiots to push forward the revolution and achieve total control. It appeals to the ego, and this is particularly important with kids. Kids or young people tend to want to fit in, and you know, by nature they're immature. We were all there once, I'm still there. And you know, it's a normal part of life to be that way. But when you hear that you're special and you're here to save the world, that's a very powerful message for young people, young minds to hear. It can be very addictive and it's very contagious. And that's why I describe it as a cult, which Sean pointed out earlier, that they make each other feel good, that they're special and they're in this together. And what's the other attributes of a cult? That they have the truth and no one else quite gets it. So they're going to take us towards revolution. And if you oppose them and say that they're wrong and look at all the damage you're causing, can you not see trans ideology is crazy? Can you not see the economic problems climate change causes, etc.? Can you not see the damage that veganism does to people's health, etc.? They will say, you don't quite understand it, you don't get it, you're not part of the revolution. So there's gargantuan egos involved here. It also gives people a sense of purpose in life, and we all need that. That's not a bad thing at all. Marxism co-opts that. I'm talking about the thing of appealing to people's emotions. Kinaltis was mentioned earlier, and which is the Irish word, the Gaelic word for kindness, which is typical Marxist virtue signalling. They suck you in with a nice veneer. It has this kind of image of being something pleasant, but in reality it's just a wolf in sheep's clothing, which is typical how Marxism works. It markets itself as being something benevolent, whereas really malevolent in nature, and it's very, very good at that. The first coat of arms of the Fabian Society, which is a subversive Marxist group established in 1884, and had one of our own, George Bernard Shaw, as one of the key figures eventually. He designed the first coat of arms, which was a wolf in sheep's clothing. So that really sums up what Marxism is all about. The effect on education is catastrophic. And I think it's been mentioned a few times. I'm sure you've all noticed the term global citizens, right? If everyone was common knowledge what Marxism was, or they would immediately understand that that's Marxist talk. The idea that it's all one world, there shouldn't be borders, countries shouldn't exist, there's no differences between races and culture. As you've seen, there's no differences between gender and male and female, according to the Marxists, because, one is going to be the oppressor. So again, back to what we said, it's all about the idea of somebody's being oppressed and they need to be saved by these wonderful cult members, of course. Comrades, the education system now is being organised to just generate more activists. The whole education system has been controlled, has been mentioned a few times tonight, to turn young people into activists to further the revolution. They can be a climate change activist, they can be a feminist, they can be a trans activist, they can want to help the poor or whatever it is. They're constantly being offered these different options, but whichever part of it you join, you still help the revolution overall. And this goes back to the idea of the socialist man, which goes right back into history, the history of communism or Marxism, is the idea that, we can have this great utopia if only all of you would change and join the revolution. So there's something wrong with you if you're not a Marxist, pretty much. And utopia is just around the corner. It also renders the education system useless, because I put it in the book, there's a section in the book where I slag off the various courses in the universities. You can do like a 3 or 4 year climate course, or a social justice course, or a women's studies course. Society is not run on people with those educations. We need engineers, we need people who are good at physics and so on, who have practical skills. If you spend 4 or 5 years in the university learning that garbage, not only are you helping Marxism, which destroys society, but you're totally useless and you don't provide anything of value. So that's what's going to happen to the kids when they get to the university level. They're going to be taught this nonsense. Also, victim culture is very, very bad for people. The idea that someone else is to blame for your issues or your suffering, this is very toxic for the human mind. We all have to take responsibility for ourselves and mature. And it's so easy to be told that someone else is the problem and you don't have to grow up. Diversity, equity and inclusion, DEI, among the many toxic effects it has, is this kind of victim culture and this idea that we all need to be pampered. It's like everybody gets a medal just for being in the race, sort of thing. When I was about 10, I had a tantrum once. I was in a soccer tournament and I didn't win it. I had a tantrum and my dad made sure I got a medal. That's not very good. That's why I was spoiled for years, and still am. So also destruction of merit. I think Eugene mentioned it earlier with DEI. If you're trying to make everybody equal, Marxism denies hierarchies, because obviously someone's in a higher position, and if someone's in a lower position, they're going to suffer. So in order to fix this, in their wisdom, they want to remove the hierarchy. And that's where the idea of equality comes from. They're trying to make everybody equal, so no one has to come second. And this is terrible, because This room, the technology in this room, the lights, the building, the internet connection, electricity, lights, the cameras, everything in this room is because of excellence, because somebody came along and said, I have an idea about making the human voice louder in a room, and they come up with the idea of a microphone. And they didn't get it right the first time. Thomas Edison, I think, had a few thousand cracks at the light bulb before he got it right and it stopped exploding. That's called excellence. DEI and so on is very, very toxic for the minds of young people because it makes them think that everything's great just the way it is and you don't need to improve, which is absolute nonsense. Marxism also divides. That's part of its modus operandi, causes division, even within families. And you all know what I'm talking about, don't you? The state wants to become the parent, which has been mentioned. The first line of defense against Marxist indoctrination is the parent. That's why they're trying to remove parents systematically from the equation to get you out of the way so they can brainwash more kids and make them part of the revolution. That's where the constitutional changes come in and so on. So just to finish off, then, the main point here really is how do we fix this? None of this is going to stop unless everybody invests some time and energy in understanding Marxism. That's the key, because how can you fight the enemy and deal with this problem if people are kind of always quite kind of off the mark and not getting it? So we should understand the ideology, develop opposition to it. Even a bit of hatred isn't a bad thing. You have the right to hate this thing. Discriminate against it, anyone who's brainwashed, and actively deny them access to young people's minds. That's the way we stop this thing. Every child or person who is galvanized against this ideology is a life saved, because it's a waste of time, a waste of a life to become Marxist activists. So it's my dream that we get a handle on this situation ASAP. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you. Great, perfect. We're all in sync, all right? So sorry for the hassle, and we're not as smooth as I'd like at the start. But anyway, it's great to see you, great to speak to you again. I know you're super busy. So we have a whole bunch of different tabs and stuff, and we're going to get into those, etc. But thanks, Pat, appreciate that. But, you know, we'll just lay some groundworks here first of all. So I know you as being an activist, a big voice on the Irish scene. I consider you a very prolific organiser, public speaker, and so on and so forth. I mean, would you say activist is a fair label for what I should call you?
Well, my first job is that of a mother. I'm a mom of two small kids. I'm a life coach. I plan events, and activism happened sort of by accident 6 years ago during the COVID days. But I suppose activist really means getting active. So I'm okay with that label or term.
Great. And also, like, would you say that what would be the main issues that you mostly focus on, again, to introduce you to the audience for any new viewers? What are the things you're most passionate about, or what issues do you think are mostly of concern in Ireland?
Yeah, where do I start? So we started campaigning years ago when the government put on the masks on children. And that really was the hill that a lot of us mothers said we would die on when they were trying to mask children all day in schools to stay safe and protect everyone. So that was the start of it. And then in 2022, the government tried to erase women from the maternity protection acts. And so that was a time when, again, we resurfaced. And then after that battle was won, we thought maybe life would quiet down a bit. And then we saw the open borders, the highly sexual library books, the transgenderism in schools. And then it was like we had this big Irish jumper, and you pull a string and it all unravels. And then we started looking into where it's coming from, and soon realized that everything that was so wrong happening was all coming from one agenda at the top, not from the Irish people. It wasn't a grassroots movement. All of this, it was a very sinister agenda being imposed on the people. So the focus that the Natural Women's Council have primarily at the moment is on what's happening in the school curriculum, which is pushing a very highly sexualized agenda onto kids, indoctrinating them through the critical social justice, which includes, all of the Marxist ideologies, the gender ideology, the, critical race theory, and everything else that's happening. So our primary focus has been on that, but we also have in our mission to protect everything related to women, children, and families.
That's great. Perfect. Yeah. So pretty much, just to stick you in a box if I can, we're talking like traditional family values, pretty much everything that's good for society in a more traditional sense. Is that fair to say?
It is correct. Yes. Everything that we campaign for, people say, oh, you're against this and you're against that. But I like to actually say, well, no, I'm pro freedom of speech. I'm pro childhood innocence. I'm pro women rights. So yes, we're against a lot of the things, infringing on our rights. But when you look at it, we're really pro all of the things that come with, morals and principles and common sense. So the establishment in Ireland are reporting to the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, and the European Union. Everything being pushed down on us, our children, and our families is not coming from the Irish people or any people on the ground.
This is it. Yeah, this is key, isn't it? Nobody kind of asked for this. And as you full know, well, you grew up in the States and you've been traveled around a bit. I lived abroad myself in lots of different countries. And really, when you start joining the dots and you notice that people across the world in other Western countries are dealing with the same stuff, then we know there's most certainly a coordinated agenda. It's certainly not a grassroots movement at all. Yeah. And I know you always seem to be kind of flat out. And this is the first time I think we've had a proper, real conversation. I think we've met a few times before, but for anyone who's just joined or whatever, we've met before, but it's usually at events when there's people around and stuff like that. We met that first time. We had a pretty long conversation. I remember it going on for about 2.5 hours. I think I got about 20 or 30 words in the whole time because you were just kind of on it, flat out, and you kept going. Even when you dropped me off later that night, I got out of the car, you were still going. And I'm very, very jealous of your energy and how prolific you are and stuff like that. I imagine you kind of getting up at like the crack of dawn, smashing like 6 to 8 espressos and just telling the kids to piss off, and then you're just on it all day with the activism. Is that how you roll?
Not really, no. I work really throughout late. So I have 2 small kids, and they're the most important thing in my life as a mother. I've been a stay-at-home mom for the last nearly 11 years. I was in corporate life, worked in senior management. I was in corporate life for 20 years working with multinationals. I was sold the lie. Of radical feminism, and I fell victim to, women have to get out and work and climb the corporate ladder, and that, your worth was based on what you have, and the car, the new car every year, and the flash holidays, and the nice designer suits. But when I woke up when I was about 38, I just had this awakening that there's something more in life. I think that something big from my life is missing. And all of this superficial corporate bubble I lived in, just wasn't doing it. And my maternal instinct kicked in, and I was 38, and it was a bit late to start in life. I had my first child at 41 and my next second child at 44. So I would encourage anyone out there to, don't fall for the lie. Don't think that as a woman, you can't stay home and have a family, and that you're oppressed if you stay home. You have to go out and work, because I wish in hindsight I had started my family 10 or 15 years before I did. It's much harder in your 40s. So what does my day look like? I work through the night when the kids are sleeping. And yes, I do get up and have many shots of espresso to get going for the day. But yeah, that is the schedule. We do all volunteer work. None of our volunteers get paid at all for what we do. We have expenses to cover just to keep the operating going, which we pay out of our own pocket until we get donations to cover. My heart sank when I got an email today to say your email hosting's about to expire. That's about €150, and then your web hosting, which is a 2-year contract, is €600, and I'm like, that's €700. We have to find that. So we're constantly shaking the bucket for change. We don't rake in $1 million a year like the trans activist groups and the National Identify as a Women's Council in Ireland. So we do a lot of just going out asking for help, but we're a grassroots group on the ground working between school runs.
This is it. Yeah, no, well, fair play. And I like the fact that, you're very candid about this as long as I've known you, that you've been on your own personal journey yourself. And we had that first conversation. I mentioned the same thing to you. It's kind of, people don't really notice some of this stuff till a bit of time has passed, and you get a bit of life experience, you start to join the dots and know something's kind of off here with some of the things we've been told. And not to knock us off track here, but the thing about motherhood and so on, I think most women say that really when they've experienced different things, then they have kids, they often say the kids are the most important thing that they've kind of done, and they often say they wish they started sooner. It seems to be a common trend for sure. And say, focusing on the education system, which I kind of know you for, you do work across a nice broad spectrum of areas. But in terms of the education system, what would you say are the most pressing issues? The kids seem to be hit with a lot of things nowadays, but what would you say are the main critical issues in the schools right now?
Yeah, there's several issues, and I think it all comes under the umbrella, which is it's all coming under the critical social justice. So everything is, sold under the guise of critical social justice, which on the surface sounds really nice because everybody likes social justice and things, being fair and equal and all of that. But when you peel back the layers and look at, well, what does that mean? It's all the children are having, what's pushed on them is all through a Marxist lens. So it's through the oppressed and the oppressor, which I know, Emmett, from the book you've written, and I've learned a lot about Marxism along the way. It's you're oppressed. So, everyone is either oppressed, and if you're not oppressed, you're an oppressor. So that is being pushed on young minds to damage the minds. And the one thing that really sticks out, which is being pushed in every subject in school, not just the social, personal health, well-being ones, is the gender ideology. So it's really concerning that despite the CAST review that came out, which says that, transitioning children should not be done outside a clinical setting, we shouldn't be using pronouns, all of the books are just completely infected with these woke ideologies. One of the books has, the genderbread person saying you can be a boy, girl, neither or both, irrespective of the sex you were assigned at birth. It's teaching them they can be non-binary, transgender, pansexual, and more. So the kids are falling prey to this predatory something akin to a cult, making a child think that they may be born in the wrong body. So if you think about that for a moment, going down to in the Beacon Alta policy, there's a new anti-bullying policy that rolled out this year for schools. It goes right down to junior infants, which is age 4 or 5, depending on when the child starts. And in the policy, it talks about, not to be a transphobic bully or have, homophobia. Well, an age 5 child wouldn't even know what transgender is, nor should they know. So if it's in the policy, what that's done is it's brought the transgender issues down through the Beacon Alta policy under the guise of kindness. So again, it's pushing these seeds into children's minds that normally wouldn't be there. And a child really, their prefrontal cortex in their brain doesn't develop until they're about 26 years old.
Yes.
So they don't have that ability to understand certain things until they're much older, and they don't have that instinct and that risk assessment part of their brain. So if they're told they may be in the wrong body, well, let's go and start my puberty blockers and my hormones, and then it leads to surgeries. And children are waking up in their late teens or early adulthood realizing they still have all of the issues they had when they felt gender confused, but now there's simply a girl that's removed her breasts or a boy that's removed his penis. The problem doesn't go away when the surgeries and drugs are taken. It actually exasperates the situation. So I think the gender is the big one. The other thing that we're seeing is all of the other fear mongering. So things like the climate alarmism is now coming into the school books. We have Greta Thunberg screaming that the world's on fire. I want you to be fearful. You should be afraid. So we had one mom contact us very upset that her child came home from school crying and said, I'm not going to be able to have children. And once the mother calmed their little girl down, it came out that, well, we were told in school there's a climate crisis, the world's on fire, so the world's actually not going to be here. And this poor child was suffering nightmares, eco-anxiety, thinking that the world's on fire, it's going to blow up. These things should not be put into a child's mind. It's damaging, it's fear-mongering, but every hour that goes in teaching them about pronouns and LGBT and transgenderism or climate alarmism or BLM, or you should feel guilty for being white or Irish, all that other garbage is taking away from their core education.
Exactly.
So what hope will that child have to get through a job interview, get a good job, get married, buy a house, and have a family? None of that will happen if children don't get a good, solid education. But they won't want to get married and have a family because the school books are teaching, sex for pleasure, active consent, contraception to prevent STIs. But if you get pregnant, get an abortion. It's nothing to do with marriage, relationships, love, or a family. That's all been removed from the relationship classes. Imagine relationship classes that don't even talk about loving, respectful relationships and marriage. It's just sex for pleasure and all of those other things. So children are really being harmed through this. Their future will be significantly affected.
Yeah, you said it there. There's touched on so many great points, of course, great overview. And, I suppose I know Marxism is my thing, but I do have to say, I suppose, that they love to control the education system, indoctrinate kids. And obviously Marxism tends to have, as the ideology driving all this, tends to have always damages the economy in several, amongst many other things, including society. And obviously, as you said it there, the kids are, not only are they getting brainwashed to be little revolutionaries, which helps the revolutionary movement, they also aren't getting a decent education in order to get a proper constructive job to go and contribute to the economy. I remember in the book I listed some of the classes where some of the courses on were like, a 4-year degree course in gender justice or climate gender justice or whatever it is. And you just know, most reasonable people can see now that the climate change agenda is just nonsense. It's a lot of it's to do with money. It's a big scam. So these kids are being hit with, they're developing anxiety over something which isn't real. And some of them are even going to study it and then are going into the economy and they can't even contribute. It's just an absolute mess. And say, of course, most people would think, well, who's driving this and so on, and we're looking for who to kind of blame and so on. But I'm thinking, say, looking at the teachers, I don't imagine all of them are waking up every day thinking about revolution. I need to go to work today and brainwash the kids. You're the person on the ground interacting with these people. What's the dynamics like, or what's the ratios like? They can't all be full-blooded activists. Surely some of the teachers are just kind of going along to get along, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I have to say, in defense of all of the teachers in Ireland, my kids are 7 and 10, so they've been in school for several years and they've had very good teachers. So in Ireland, we have really good teachers. And when you talk to teachers about this, many of them don't know about the hidden agenda. They don't know where it's coming from. And some of them haven't seen the explicit material because, there's things that are the approach that is the way it's done is the pedagogical approach. So if a child brings something up, it's their lived experience and they bring it into the discussion, it allows that teacher has the autonomy to just let that conversation go. So some teachers haven't seen it and don't know the agenda. The ones that are teaching the junior cycle books and have seen those books with the really horrific, highly sexual, indoctrinating content, some of them are saying, no, I am not teaching that. They skip right over it, or they say to the kids, sorry, there's only 2 sexes. We're going to skip right over this gender stuff. But some teachers are very happy to teach it.
some teachers are activists, and that goes in the primary schools, secondary schools. But I did an interview with a whistleblower who teaches in the third level lecture hall, and academia has also been infected with this woke mind virus. So although some teachers won't teach it, the fact that it's in there, the fact that they have the ability to do it using the books and toolkits, some will be more than happy to push it. So we're not going to be happy. In our group, the Natural Women's Council will not stop until we have a complete education reform. Completely remove all the books that are inappropriate. We know they don't have sign off. That's something that most parents have no idea. We did a Freedom of Information request to the Department of Education what the sign off and the risk assessment was for the school books. We got a letter back that says the Department of Education has no oversight, sign off, or anything to do with any of the books or toolkits being used. So we were referred to the publisher, and the publisher said, go talk to the teacher if you're angry about the books. So they're directing us to go shout at the teachers because of all this inappropriate content, when really it should lie with the Department of Education. The buck stops with them. And when I met with my own school principal, I asked, do you think that the school books have sign off? Well, of course they think that. I handed him the letter from the Department of Education and said, here's the letter. No, they don't have sign off. And there's also no risk assessment for the trans activist group like Tenny and Belong To, who go into schools. Belong To goes in every November for a week for stand up. They have a stand up week, and that's not been risk assessed either. And if you look at the CAS report and the HHS report, that completely and clearly states children should not be transitioned. Pronouns are not neutral. My question is, and we will be asking this of the insurance companies. We have a letter ready to go. The question is, if a child is harmed in any way from what is taught in schools that has had no risk assessment, no safeguarding statement, and no sign off, and a mother wants to take a lawsuit, is that principal, board of management, or teacher's insurance company going to cover losses if they're sued when they're teaching something that contradicts medical best practice and has no sign off? Who's going to be paying for that lawsuit?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, as well, I know, as you mentioned, the whistleblower interview is there, and I saw a clip of one of them earlier. It's great work, by the way. I mean, I know that, as you saying, you're going to get teachers refusing to go along with this stuff. Some of them will. I mean, how many teachers are coming forward saying that they don't want to participate? Is that number increasing, do you think?
It is increasing, yes. So we've had, so far, we've had a few whistleblower teacher interviews. We had the Mary Creedon whistleblower. She blew the whistle on the DCU course. We had Stephen Lynch blow the whistle on how the Teachers Union of Ireland is completely captured, insofar that Communist Party leaflets were being handed out at the door. We had Seamus Michael come on and talk about how they're trying to indoctrinate the teachers. And then I did my fourth teacher whistleblower just last Friday. So more are coming forward to blow the whistle, but we're also having a lot reach out to us. We have parent support groups set up on WhatsApp groups, very large groups. We have primary school teacher groups, secondary school teacher groups, and we're getting hundreds of emails from teachers who are saying, we are not teaching that. What can we do to push back? So what we need is just all of the teachers to rise up and say, our job is to teach the children. Our job is to teach them the real subjects, science, history, geography, language, etc., and not this critical social justice garbage. So the more that rise up, the better it is, and makes it easier for parents. So we don't have to fight the battle. We've been fighting the battle for years, but if all the teachers in the schools just say no, it's a lot less stress for the parents and the children who don't want to have this in the school. And we need principals to stand up. We've sent letters. We have a letter campaign on our ConnectEd recent campaign. We sent a 7-page detailed letter to every school, every minister, and every TD with several demands of what we want to see stopped in Ireland, including what's in the classroom that's harming children. So they can't say they didn't know. We've sent them all of the evidence. They know that it's harmful. They know that it's defies medical best practice and science. So they can't say they didn't know. But we need thousands of parents. We need teachers and principals now to stand up and protect the children.
Excellent. Yeah, good stuff. Pressure is the way, isn't it? Really, pressure in as
It
many
is.
numbers as possible, for sure. Anybody joining late, please do share this around. You're watching on YouTube or watching on X. Make sure you repost, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Going out live on YouTube, X. I drop Rumble, I drop Telegram, and Twitch as well. But thanks for joining in, folks. With regards to, say, as you well know, because you've been dealing with them, and we are dealing with people who are kind of, the true believers, the more fanatical ones who think that they're doing the right thing. As usual with these types of people going back over the decades, they tend to find ways of making sure that they stay in control of the narrative. It's really quite extraordinary, even where teaching kids is concerned. And as we know, there's often this somehow, trying to creep in, like the state almost wants to be the parent sort of thing, or the system wants to get between the parents and the kids. I mean, I heard a rumor a while ago there was kind of something similar to, like, you worked in the corporate world, like the NDAs, or non-disclosure agreements. I heard a rumor there was something in the schools similar to that, where they're trying to basically do what they do in the classroom, and their teachers are being told to tell the kids to keep this inside the room. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's class contracts in the books that they're asking children to sign. Now, no minor, no child, no one under 18 should ever be asked to sign any contract. And so there is a contract in the SPHE books. Funny, it's not in the math or geography books, but in the sex ed books and the social, personal health, well-being books, there's contracts. We found a document on the NCCA website. Our teachers were given this document, and we verified it and we pulled it up. Luckily, we downloaded it because I think the NCCA has taken it down. But the document said there was one of how to create a safe classroom and how to create an inclusive classroom. And one of the documents said that what happens in the classroom stays in the classroom, and that goes for teachers as well. So asking a child to keep a secret and having them sign a contract is really, really dangerous, because something I teach my young children and I've taught from day one is you never keep secrets. We don't have secrets in our house. Secrets are not good. There's happy surprises, like a surprise birthday party or a surprise present, but not to keep secrets. Yet the school is asking children to keep secrets through a class contract and a document that says what happens in the class. So that's really stepping in between parent and child. There's also a subversion of parental rights, whereby for the junior cycle, which is the age 12 and 13 materials, there was a consultation that was done a couple of years ago, but parents weren't invited. There was no memo to the school, no letter to the house. The only way that parents found out about the consultation is if they happened to catch it on the NCCA website or from groups like ours that went out and got the information out. We got out 250,000 leaflets on the street. We did events, we did podcasts, and thousands of parents pushed back against this ideology that was going into the junior cycle, all of this gender nonsense. But Norma Foley, who was Minister for Education at the time, completely ignored parents, completely ignored them. She did state that parents can opt out, but opting out isn't working for many reasons. One reason the opting out is pretty much useless at this point is this stuff is poisoning, infecting all of the subjects. We did a podcast on the naturalwomenscouncil.com. You can go to our website and click on our YouTube, a podcast on a book we found called Louder Than Words. It's an English book with a whole chapter on sponsored by TENI, Trans Equality Network Ireland. So a whole bunch of stuff on pronouns and gender ideology in the English book. Forget about reading Shakespeare and learning real English. It's going to teach kids pronouns and gender ideology. So that is one reason that opt-out is not being respected. The second thing is several parents in our network are really upset that the school is not providing supervision if they want to opt them out of these radical ideologies or anything that contradicts with their conscience. The school is asking the parent to collect the child during this hour lesson and drop them back later. Some parents have had to leave their jobs. They drive the child to school in the morning. They're having to come back midday to collect the child, then bring them back after the transgender education, and then pick them up at the end of the day. That's 4 round trips to school. four journeys to the school. They couldn't keep a job and do that. So this is really causing chaos in families because the school is not allowing that child to go into the library or another classroom or do their reading or artwork. They're forcing the parent to come and collect the child. But if you look at other things that kids opt out of, let's just say there's a Muslim child who goes to a Catholic school. They're allowed to opt out of religion. They absolutely find supervision for that child when they don't want to attend their Grow in Love or their Catholic religion. But if it's a Irish child who doesn't want to attend this radical sex ed, they're not respecting that.
Yeah, of course. And fascinating stuff, but, shocking also. And that even the parents, it's sneaky as well, because the parents are finding out from some of the things being pushed, from other sources. It's almost like they're trying to like hide what they're up to, or they're almost getting ready for the backlash almost before it happens. And I remember in the book, I don't know, if there's any examples of this in Ireland, but I remember, I'm sure if it hasn't happened yet in Ireland, but you could tell me maybe that, they're going to make examples of teachers or anyone who tries to step outside the rules and so on. I remember in the UK, there was I put this in the book, the teacher in some school, I think it was Anderton Primary School, girls' school in Birmingham. She walked into the class and said, "Good morning, girls," something like that. And it was a big drama. The girls said they didn't want to be misgendered. The staff got involved and it became a protest and all this stuff. And I don't know if she eventually lost her job from pressure or something like that, but it kind of made me think that often that's what they do. They kind of make an example of somebody. Any kind of cases of that in Ireland just yet?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to talk about the gender language, I'll touch on that first and then talk about the way that they have made examples of teachers. There's a document as well from the NCCA. I think it's the one how to create an inclusive classroom. And it states clearly on the document, which is guidance for teachers, that they are not to use gender normative language. So avoid saying mothers and fathers and avoid saying boys and girls. So don't say mothers and fathers. That's offensive. That's not inclusive. And don't say boys and girls. So say maybe good morning people or whatever, good morning folks. So that's happening. And then if we look at what's happening in Ireland, I mean, there's a teacher that most people in Ireland and certainly many around the world have seen of what's happened to the teacher from Wilson's Hospital School, Enoch Burke. He refused to promote transgenderism and refer to a child as they, them. There was an altercation between him and the principal. He was put on leave, still being paid by the school, but he showed up at the school gate every day to do his job because he hadn't been suspended. He was showing up, he's on payroll, and he went into prison. He's been in prison 3 or 4 times. He's back in prison now. It's nearly 600 days. So it all started because he refused to, due to his religious beliefs, also safeguarding of the children and common sense, refused to use pronouns, and he's in prison over 600 days because he broke a court order by showing up to do his job. So he's created a real problem for the establishment because they don't know what to do with Enoch because he isn't backing down. He's highlighted the issue, even more than our 250,000 leaflets did. I mean, everyone in Ireland, I think, has heard the name Enoch Burke. It's interesting that a couple of people from the disciplinary committee that were going to review his situation just resigned. So it's a case of, are the rats jumping the ship before it sinks, considering what's come out in all of the medical reports, but also seeing the tsunami come across from the US and other countries that have completely dropped all of this gender nonsense.
That's good. It's like it's kind of like it's effective for a while, and then people start complaining, and then there's a backlash, and then they start eventually kind of lose their bottle. But it's good that the pressure and the actions are kind of working. And would you say that forgive my ignorance here, but I know that the state, of course, is going to be pushing a lot of this stuff because they can control the state schools a bit easier and so on. But I mean, do you see this stuff in Ireland across the board? Is this right across the spectrum, even into private education too?
It's in all of the primary and secondary schools, unless you have a situation where that specific principal has said no, and that has happened on some occasions where this gender stuff isn't in the school. It's not even in the Beacon Alta policy. As far as private schools, well, Wilson's is a fee-paying school. When I walked into Wilson's and spoke with the acting principal myself, the entire lobby in the school was covered in pride, progressive, belonged to, all of this it was like the trans activists just went in and blew up in the lobby. It was everywhere. So as far as other private schools, I've been onto their websites to look, and there is still a lot of the diversity, inclusion, and all of that, because that's how they're selling it. Everybody thinks, well, isn't diversity great? And isn't inclusion great? And it looks good on paper, but it's like, the wolf in sheep's clothing is, when you start to see those buzzwords, they're not always how we think they are. So it's happening, I think, in every school is a risk. What I say to parents when they asked, is it in my school? I go back and say, you need to ask to see all of your children's books and online toolkits. So you have a right as a parent to request that. So ask to see everything that your child is taught, including the lesson plans, but then go and meet with your principal and teacher to make sure they clearly understand your views, that you do not want your child to be subject to all of this. So, and there's letters on our website under naturalwomenscouncil.com. There's some opt-out letters as well that people can send or formulate their own. There's templates there to make sure that the parent needs to know that they are the primary educator of their own child. Nothing is forced. Nothing is mandatory. I am my child's mother. I am the primary educator, and the school acts in loco parentis in my absence when I hand them over. But the buck stops with the parent, and people need to assert those rights.
Absolutely. And where can people find on the site here, if you can direct me, and what you were just talking about?
So if you go under campaigns on the first one to start with, if you go under campaigns, go to the Connect Ed campaign.
Okay. Yep.
So Connect Ed, that's the newest one that we launched. We spent the summer actually writing a booklet. So you can scroll down a little bit there, and people can watch at their leisure our 2-minute promo video. And if you click the Parents Connect Ed Guide to Irish Education, the first PDF, if you click on that, it's a 20-page guide. Parents reached out to us and said, where do we start? We're just finding out that something isn't right. Where do we start? Where is it coming from? What's in the books, and what can we do about it? So we wrote this book over the summer. We launched it with our back to school campaign, and it really is start to finish. If parents took like 1 hour of their week and looked at this book and all the links, I mean, they could do it in 20 minutes if they didn't open all the links, but this is a comprehensive guide for parents to stay connected to their kids' education so they know what's going on. But then after looking at this, it's getting a copy of all of their children's school books and online toolkits to say, what is my child being exposed to? I, as a mother, didn't want to blindly trust the state, whether it was the state trying to put masks on my kids. I did my research. I said no. Whether it was the state saying you need to get your injections during the COVID time, I looked at all the data from my day-to-days in banking and went, risk analysis here, no. And then with education, what are my kids getting exposed to? Should I blindly trust the state with my children? No. My children belong to me. And if every parent takes that approach and says, our children belong to us, not the state, we need to assert our rights. And really, it's time to figure out what your kids are getting exposed to. It's your moral duty as a parent. Don't just blindly trust. We have spoon-fed the information to you in this guide. Take a moment to look at it. Look at your kids' books. What's more important than what your child is learning for the 6 hours a day they're away? And for parents who both work, the child is spending more time with other adults during the day than they are with their own mother or father. So if you have your child at home, you need to be having conversations with them. You need to take the time with your children, keep them off the tablets and screens, and by all means, look at what your kids are learning in school.
Absolutely. So that document you put together looks very impressive. Nice and professional. And I know you sent me some slides. We can get to those shortly. But you brought up the issue there of the kind of the way, unfortunately, if something has a pleasant veneer or a nice mask, fortunately, that's enough to get past people's guard. The whole wolf in sheep's clothing thing. And there's the whole Canaltas thing. So any viewers who are watching who are not Irish, Canaltas is the Irish Gaelic language word for kindness, I believe. So it has this nice, warm sound to it. And I notice as well, because, obviously, sniffing out Marxism as part of what I do. It's a clever what they've done because it's virtue signaling. It sounds quite nice, but there's an agenda behind it. But also it's an Irish language word, which is a classic trick because they're trying to make you seem like it's almost like patriotic or good for the country, but it's anything but. And I mean, could you tell us a little bit more about Canaltus as well, and what's that all about? And also, is there any other examples of them using terms in that way, like Irish language terms?
Yeah, so Canalta means kindness. Be Canalta is be kind. And I sent you earlier a screen grab of a school's policy on just showing people what the Canaltas is. There's also on our website, if you go back to our website, we have a campaign we launched on the Be Canalta program under the campaigns tab, Be Canalta. And it just explains, we did a deep dive into it, looked at all the language and looked at what it means. We did a podcast on it. So that policy brings transgender issues right down to junior infants. So if a child starts school, they're 4 years or 5 years of age, it brings transgenderism through the anti-bullying policy. This is a problem for a couple of reasons. Is one, regardless of people's views on the trans issues, all bullying is wrong. So there should be no bullying in school for anyone, whether it's the color of someone's skin or their weight or where they're from, or there's, sexual preferences or whatever it is. All bullying is wrong. So to actually tier the bullying and to specify the types, it's putting certain types of bullying as a priority over others.
Exactly.
And that's making people feel that some classes or the way some people identify is more important than them. So that's not equal at all. That defies equality. So the first thing is it's specifying types, which is wrong. The second thing that's wrong is, how can you teach an age 5 child not to be a transgenderism bully or a homophobic bully or whatever it is in there if you're not teaching them about transgenderism, about homosexuality and all those other sexual preferences. So if you're going to put it in policy, you have to teach the children this, right? So even though Ms. McEntee, who was education minister, now she's moved on again. She's had, I think, 3 minister jobs in the last year and a half, can't keep a job. She said, transgenderism isn't being pushed into primary schools. Well, yes, it is through the policy. And in our Connect Ed guide, we dedicated a full page to what she said and then a full page to discredit those lies. So it's being brought in through the policy. So in practice, what it could mean is, if my child, who's gender critical and believes there's only male and female, man and woman, and we don't use any pronouns, if a teacher walked in and it was a man in a dress and said, "I'm Miss, I don't know, Betty Boop, you need to call me she or miss," and my kid said, "No, you're a man," under this policy, that could be bullying. So my child could be reprimanded for not being an ally. The allyship. Part of Marxism, what they're doing in school is you have to be an ally. The opposite of an ally is a bully. So don't be a bully. You have to be an ally. You have to use pronouns. And when belong to come in schools, I've looked at the belong to, which is the trans activist youth group in Ireland. In their toolkit from one of the years, it had in there, not to misgender anyone. Don't use the wrong pronoun. It also had not to dead name anyone. So I know you as Emmett, but if in school one day you decide that you want to become Ellie, and I accidentally call you Emmett because I've known you for years and we're in school together, that's dead naming. And it states in the guide that you should apologize and be more cognizant not to do that again. Don't dead name and misgender. Wow. The guide also talks about things like top surgery, removing the breasts, and bottom surgery and hormone blockers and all that other stuff. These trans activists have unfettered access to our schools. They are part of developing the policies. So the policy wasn't done in consultation or the parents didn't help develop it, but the trans activists did. So it's a way to slip that transgenderism right in the back door into age 5 classrooms.
Wow, shocking stuff. And you said it there, that what they've done is it's the wolf in sheep's clothing. It's got a nice veneer on it, but really they're essentially turning some kids into the oppressor and others are the oppressed. So if you don't go along with the activism, now you're the oppressor, you're part of the problem. Is that a fair assessment of what they're doing?
That's exactly right. And the same thing goes with there's BLM in the school books under the political education, the CSPE. There's BLM, there's climate, there's how to be an activist. They're creating little Marxist foot soldiers out of these innocent students who want to go to school to learn. And we are hearing complaints from students as well. Students were locked down during the COVID era where they had to attend school classes through Zoom from their bedrooms. And it was just, the mental health effect it had was horrendous. But we're hearing that children now are actually delighted to be back in school, in person, seeing their friends, living their best life. They do not want to learn this nonsense. They want to go to learn. So the students are fed up with this, and it's creating more of a divide between people who are different because of this being pushed than if they just let kids be kids. Kids aren't born racist. Kids are born full. Kids are born full of love. Kids are born naturally kind. When you start telling a child that they are privileged because they're white, male, or Irish, or they should feel guilty for being white and they're the oppressor, they have to join the BLM movement and they have to join the climate movement and they have to believe in all of this nonsense. Their kids are getting really angry about this. So they're actually, it's probably it's backfiring a bit on the agenda because they're getting fed up with it.
Yeah, because I suppose we all have this reaction of when we feel like we're being coerced that we're going to reject something. And actually, when you brought up the whole white privilege stuff, for the viewers to give them some context, clearly this revolutionary ideology sees white people as the oppressor and so on, and without going into probably the harder side of it and the geopolitical stuff or mass immigration, even just looking at the effect on the kids. It's obvious that more and more immigrants or people who are not genetically Irish are in the education system because of the way things are going. That means more kids in the system who are not Irish, and if the Irish kids feel that they are the oppressor class, you're actually ironically opening the door to things like bullying, racial tensions. As well as the kids worrying about what's going to happen to the planet, and all the other stuff they're being bombarded with, or their gender. Now, on top of this, they have to worry about feeling guilty for being Irish.
Absolutely. Guilty for being Irish. And then one of the books, it teaches them the climate. There was a parent that said in the books, it was talking about, crickets or eating bugs and not eating beef. That's just crazy. So it's planting all of this fear into the children. So they go to school, they're told they could be a boy, girl, neither or both, not to drive a car, not to travel, not to eat beef, eat your beetles, and don't be a racist, transphobic bully. And the kids are like, wait a minute, I thought I came to learn my English, math, geography, and science. So they're getting they're getting dumbed down. When we did the whistleblower interview last week with the college lecturer, he said, I asked the question of what effect is this having on children's education? For every hour or 400 hours they're putting into this garbage, what's it doing to their real learning? And the IQ across the West has dropped, the average from 100 down to 98. So a significant drop in the IQ since they brought in all of this DEI stuff and Marxism into the schools.
Yeah, and I've talked about this a lot in my work as well. Obviously there's a lot of moving parts here to all this stuff. And as we said, it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. But this sort of ideology likes the idea of uniformity, collectivism, obedience, and it tends to have the effect of destroying excellence, because they don't like hierarchies. They don't like the idea that someone might be higher than someone else or better. So then we see them bringing in things like equity and so on, trying to compensate for the differences between different groups. This sort of stuff has obviously a catastrophic effect on the minds of kids, because they have to learn that to be successful and produce things, you have to acknowledge sometimes that there are differences in ability or talent, or obviously your work rate too. That's a big one. If kids aren't taught to work hard, if they're taught that a lazy person can get the same grades as someone who's working hard, then they're going to come out entirely kind of motivated. This is something else that you're demotivated. Is this another effect that you're kind of witnessing?
Absolutely. A kind of a good expression I heard that really sums it up is, if everyone is the same, then no one is unique. If everyone is the same, No one is special. And when I went to school back in the States, this was many years ago, I'm sure this stuff was creeping in then because it's come, as far back as the Rockefeller influence on education. So if I looked back through my old materials, I'd probably see it, but I didn't really feel it. It wasn't as heavy as it is now. So in my school, I studied really hard. I got made the honor roll. You were recognized for making the honor roll. Your names were actually published in the local newspaper. I played sports. I was a competitive athlete. I was offered a sports scholarship to university for soccer. I did tennis. I did, I skied. I gave 100% at everything I did because I liked to do the best. And I was sometimes at certain things in the top percentages. And even in the workplace, I climbed up the corporate ladder during my 20-year career through very hard work and through diligence and doing a good job.
Yes.
But what used to really drive me crazy as a senior manager is the bell curve. Have you heard of the bell curve, how they manage performance in the workplace? So you'd have a manager and everybody got their goals in the beginning of the year. So same with students, everybody has their goals. Here's what you have to do to make the grade and the goal. So you have managers who, work really hard. If you're a good senior manager, the managers underneath you are going to work really hard, give it their best. But if they exceeded their goals that they were given in the beginning of the year and they signed their name, I agree to these goals, here's my meets, here's my exceeds, et cetera. When it came to goal writing, you could have a manager that exceeded their goals, but because you might have had 3 managers that did really well, you had to put them on a bell curve and drop someone down to a meets. They could not exceed if too many other people did really well. So you had to do a bell curve to say only 2 are allowed to exceed, and then 20 are going to meet, and then 10 are, whatever, not going to meet. So no matter how hard you tried, you were bell curved, DEI. And then I also remember, the DEI hiring. And this was back in the States. A friend of mine was a software engineer and he had 2 interview candidates. And one of them was just top of the pack. I mean, the credentials, the experience, the interview was smashing. The other person was mediocre, but he was told he had to hire that other person because she was a woman. And the man was the better candidate, but he couldn't hire her because they needed to meet a quota hiring women. So the same within the workplace or making a sports team or in school. It should all be based on merit, not the color of someone's skin or whether they're male or female or whether they're Catholic, Protestant or Irish or whatever it is. It's just merit. Everyone should be rewarded based on their merit. And that's where we're really failing in society. And children are victims of this because, to your point, they'll be discouraged. Why bother try if you just get a point for showing up? You don't get a trophy for being the best in class. You just get a point because you turned up today. What's going to inspire that child to do the best they can be and they can do the way that I felt when I was a child of wanting to aim to be the best and get the blue ribbon or the red ribbon versus last place. Those that drive and competition, I believe, is healthy. It didn't do me any harm to be competitive. I loved it. I loved you get recognition, you get it, whether it's a trophy or an hour off school early because you got the honor roll or whatever it was. It's just, you don't want everyone to just be in the same melting pot.
Yeah, and that thing of, again, I suppose with this kind of type of activism that we've been dealing with, it's so emotion based. It's so based around the idea that we need to protect certain types of individuals from harm, arguably life itself. Because life is going to be full of, negative emotions and negative situations and so on. And we're talking about merits. You mentioned sports. I mentioned this at your event, actually, in that short kind of speech I did. I talked about when I was a kid, I loved playing football, but I remember my dad, I was upset, I think, because I didn't win and I got a trophy anyway, or whatever it was. I mean, you're better off letting kids experience the ups and downs without kind of pampering them too much. There has to be a balance between the so-called masculine and feminine standpoints when you're a parent. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that. And, whether it's sports or academia, you have to learn also a bit of tough love. If you run a race and you don't come in, sorry, you don't get anything. If you go to school and you don't pass your courses, sorry, you're not going to make the grade and you're not going to pass your test and get into college. So this whole thing of, the bell curves and the diversity and all the giving someone extra points because of, maybe they're disadvantaged in that. I believe it's just everyone should be out of the womb. You're equal, regardless of your skin color, regardless of anything else. You come out of the womb equal, and your shot in life is how well you do and how the effort you put in and the result that you get personally. And that's being taken away from children.
Brilliant. Good stuff. Excellent, Jana. Anyone joining late, make sure you do share this around your whatever platform you're watching on. Make sure you follow, subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. Make sure you follow Jana as well on X, or she's got two profiles actually. There's at Natural Women's IE, and there's also at JK London as well as her other profile too. One of the things that stood to me as being like kind of a sort of an alarm bell was the concept of this pushing global citizenship, because all the other stuff, I would probably put it in the more arguably the sociological side of Marxism, about identity groups and oppressor versus oppressed and stuff. But another aspect of this, international revolutionary movement is the idea of building like a world collective and so on, and making us all citizens of the world and so on. I mean, when did this term, I do believe that the term global citizen has started to kind of pop up. And I mean, when did this kind of start, do you know, or at least when did it start in the Irish education system?
I only saw it in the last maybe year and a half, and there is a page in one of the book pages that I sent you. We can post onto the thread later. Global citizenship is in the books, and in my children's Catholic primary school a couple of years ago, in the school hall, there was a big handmade 20-meter long sign that said global citizenship that the children made. And I saw it there, and I talked to my kids. I said, "Oh, do you know what that means, global citizenship?" And they hadn't been talked to about it, so they had no idea. But it was in the school hall. So I said to my children, "You are Irish citizens. You're not global citizens. You were born in Ireland. You are citizens of this nation, not global citizens." So they're, again, it's breaking down. It's really breaking down pride for their nation. So everything about what's happening in schools, this Marxism, critical social justice, it's breaking down family values. So we talked about earlier that no book has anything about marriage, respect, loving relationships, and sex for procreation when you're married. It's sex for pleasure. It's, and then there's one book out there we found that had something about a trad wife. And it had a picture of a woman baking a cake, and it was making fun of stay-at-home moms like myself, saying, don't be a trad wife, that stereotype. So it's breaking down the family. It's breaking down the sexes. So we see a lot about, don't have toxic masculinity. You don't be a toxic male. Don't be, and it's like, actually, masculinity is great. Femininity is great. Let's celebrate the differences of the sexes, not break them down. So
yes,
these radical feminists that want to emasculate the men, or these, all of this has to stop, so stop breaking down the sexes, breaking down the families, breaking down faith, breaking down nations. It really wants to just create this sort of one world, global citizenship where there's not even a clear difference of sexes, and then throw in there that kids are told they can be boy, girl, neither, or both. So they're confuse the children as well, rip the floor out from under them. So it's breaking down everything moral, everything principled is getting just attacked and broken down.
Absolutely, yeah. And I like how our work converges a lot. And you're the one who's on the ground dealing with this stuff, and obviously I focus on the brainwashing and the global picture as well. And I do think that all of these different things from where I'm standing are kind of like they're like wrecking balls that break down all the obstacles that are in the way to making people kind of accept being global citizens. And maybe some viewers might think this is a bit far-fetched, but the idea of breaking down the nations, breaking down the borders, which they're kind of doing already, and mixing up all the races, mixing up all the cultures, because hopefully they think it's going to create some sort of a better world. Do you kind of get that sense? I mean, some people say that maybe some of this stuff is some people, they don't know what they're pushing. Others think they're making a better society. Others might be just nihilists or whatever. They like to destroy things. What kind of overall impression do you get from all this?
Yeah, because I know the agenda, I can see the whole big picture. I've looked at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I've looked at the World Health Organization document standards for sexuality. I've looked at the World Economic Forum and watched some of their speeches, and I see that this is all coming from the top down. But for someone, which would probably be most parents out there who don't even know what's going on, they don't know about the agenda, they probably don't even know about the Sustainable Development Goals. Anybody can look that up. It's not a conspiracy. Look up Sustainable Development Goals. The language that's being used is so deceptive. So people think, be kind and social justice and how to be active and global citizens thinking of the world. And they think it's all about biodiversity. They think it's about keeping the world clean and green. They think it's about being, respectful of all those trans identifying children that are being, produced through this social engineering. So I think that people are really brainwashed, and the unelected bureaucrats, everywhere from the Irish government to the European Union to the United Nations have done a bang up job brainwashing the public. There's really, Dr. Matthias Desmet speaks about it, mass formation psychosis. How did they get 99% of people to put a mask on and mask up their kids? How do they get 95% of people to agree to injecting an experimental drug? Because they did it through fear. So they had people living in this state of terror, this state of fear. I don't want to die. I don't want to kill my neighbor. Then that all went through. And then it's, there's the wars. We have to flood the borders. And it started with, letting in the Ukrainian women and children, which most of us have no problem with. There's two Ukrainian children in my daughter's class. They're lovely. They sadly had to come over. Their parents or their fathers left behind. They're here with their mom. Their moms work. They've integrated. That's different. But then it quickly went from the Ukrainian women and children coming to thousands and thousands of single men. Where are the women? Where are the children? Where are the grandparents? But the people that got brainwashed into thinking that everyone coming over is a Ukrainian woman and child, they could not even see that these were single fighting age men coming in. They were that in the hypnosis. And the same with transgenderism. It's, this child's really confused. Would you rather have a living daughter or a dead son? If you don't trans your, daughter, she's going to commit suicide. There's no stats to back that up. In fact, children who go through the transition and regret it, there's a high rate of suicide. But the doctors in these gender clinics are saying, would you rather a living daughter or a dead son? They're going to kill themselves if you don't do this. So parents are believing that. They're believing, if I don't give my children this drug to sterilize them and put them on this, hormone and remove their body parts, they're going to kill themselves. I better do it. It's like, well, where's the stats to back that up? So people just aren't looking and doing their own research. They're blindly trusting. But I think back to Dr. Matthias Desmet, he said, this mass formation psychosis, eventually, just by talking, when you keep speaking the truth over and over and over again, eventually, even if it's that tiny pixel on the screen, you're going to see it. You can't avoid the truth. The truth will come out. We just need more and more people to speak it. But we can already see the cracks in the foundation of all of this wokery. But it doesn't mean that we don't have work to do in getting all of the curriculum redesigned, the education reformed, all those books out of the class and rebuild society. But we see the cracks in the foundation, which is great due to all of the pushback and the mass awakening.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much, folks, especially if you're joining in late. We've got a little going a little bit late earlier because of my little tech problems earlier on with Telegram. But all good. Please do share this space around, like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. The channel on YouTube is Resolving Reality, and my X profile is at Resolving Or. You check out Jana's X profiles as well, at JK Lunden and at Natural Women's IE. I was thinking, we could move into the slides. Actually, I'm thinking, just double checking, Jan, do we have you till about 10 o'clock? Is that okay? Or
10 is good. Yep, that's fine.
Okay, no worries. Good stuff. I'll just drop us into this one here. So this is going to play itself. Let me pause this. It's going to do its own thing here now. Bring into the preview, restart, and Great, it's not playing. So I dropped these in any old sequence. So I got 15 images here. These are the ones you sent me earlier. So I can just control these manually, and then you can tell us what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so Make a Difference is the CSPE, the civic, I think, social political education. It's like the, not the SPHE, which has all the sex ed stuff, but it's the political social education. So this is one example of a book called Make a Difference, published by Folens, and you have a few pages that I've sent you there.
Great.
You can scroll through some if you want. So again, we talked about the, bringing in the racism right into the classroom. Whereas, I don't think children are racist. I think that's something that's being planted in their minds. But in the book, it's talking about Black Lives Matter and the fight against racism. And there's a racism red card and, all of this stuff that kids, that if you have a child in class and they're maybe bullying someone because of their skin color, you address that one-to-one. But I don't really think that Irish people are a racist people at all. But this is in our children's school books.
Absolutely.
And BLM is a political movement. So this is bringing those politics and these political movements, not grassroots. These are, astroturfed political movements, heavily funded, by the likes of, people like George Soros and other unsavory characters. So bringing those movements into our children's classroom.
Great. Sorry about the cropping.
And then
did this in such a hurry earlier. I cropped it. I'll try and fix that while you're talking.
You can still see you can still see all those rainbows. So we get the message, and again, it's bringing in the LGBTQI plus pride. There's the rainbow flag, and then of course you can see all of the other flags. They can pick whatever sexual identity flag they want. They're all in child-friendly colors. They always pick child-friendly symbols like mermaids and unicorns, don't they, and rainbows, but it's definitely not child friendly. So that's in the political book. So bringing in the LGBTQI, which is a political movement, that's in the books there. There's
lots of bright colors, and it's funny how they structure it. The way they write this stuff and so on. It's to catch the eye, make it exciting, particularly for young people. This is something cool and hip, and you really want to get into this sort of thing. Typical.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have, this is interesting. There's Dr. Niall Muldoon, who's Ireland's children's ombudsman. I might as well give Dr. Muldoon a mention. A couple of years ago, we sent a complaint regarding some of the highly sexual library books, really dangerous library books in the kids section that were pushing adult fetishes onto children. Things like teaching children about fisting and teaching children they can order drugs online, puberty blockers, how to inject themselves. But Dr. Niall Muldoon wrote back and said it didn't meet the threshold for harm. So there he is right there. And then, of course, we have the story of on the right, you can see, I think, someone who became a rapper, again, bringing in that, the racism. So that's there. I think he was probably, I think I can't see the screen. My eyes are tired tonight, but I think that one, if I remember right, he was maybe a refugee and then became a rapper. So it's promoting as well. The books do promote the open borders. So the books promote a lot of things that families might have different views on. So, they were pushing the Palestinian moments for silence in school and the Gaza. But not everyone's on the side of Gaza. Some are on the side of Israel. So it's bringing politics into the classroom, which is really, really wrong. And it contradicts, family values, because different families have different political views, and that's okay.
Yes.
But to bring political views into the classroom is telling children what to think, not how to think. And then these are some of the groups that are in the book, some usual suspects we see here: Amnesty International, of course, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Frontline Defenders, Human Rights Watch. And then this is an interesting one. We all saw this scandal that went out recently, the Irish Council for Civil Liberties. They should be completely defunded based on this scandal. They put out a document that implied it was going to be made a legal requirement for schools to bring in using pronouns pronouns. And there was no legal requirement to do so. It was a complete, I'll call it a fraud or a scam, it looked like. But now, of course, even though that one is dropped, the Maynooth University was commissioned to look at, I think, a pronoun study or whatever they're doing about bringing pronouns. So it's back in the news again about using pronouns in school. Everyone seems to have put the Cass report into the bin, which says that pronouns are not a neutral territory. But there's the ICCL in the children's political book, ISPCC, Bernardo's, and all of these globalist outfits, again, right in our children's school books.
Yeah, there must be, I mean, again, you'd know a lot better than I would. There must be like, surely there's like hundreds of groups in Ireland pushing globalism, whether it's in the NGO complex or outside of it, surely.
Absolutely. There's in Ireland over 32,000 NGOs. The quote I saw is that they get over 6 billion a year, but someone said it's closer to 12 billion. So it could be between 6 and 12 billion of taxpayer money. These all push the agenda. So if we remember back in 2024, in the March 24 referendum, all of the NGOs, all of the political parties tried to erase woman, mother, and home from Bunreacht na hÉireann, the Constitution.
Yeah.
Our group and a few other groups went out and campaigned for a no vote. And luckily, 75% of the Irish people voted no, despite every political party and NGO trying to erase woman and mother. The Irish people said, no, the mothers and women aren't going anywhere. We're going to keep them in the Constitution. But they wanted to do that because if they can erase the mother and home, erasing home from the Constitution could affect our rights to private property, something that was on the table, was a 39th Amendment to the Constitution, right to housing. And it stated in there that our property can be delimited for the common good of all residents. Not citizens, not the Irish, but the common good of all residents. So our private property can be delimited. So private property rights go against the Communist Manifesto. They don't want anyone to have private property. So this Marxist agenda, this critical social justice is really, the Marxist is the springboard leading to communism. And communism doesn't like faith, family, or private property or borders.
Exactly. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, how it all starts to come together. And I remember recently I saw a clip, a short excerpt of text of Friedrich Engels, one of the co-authors of the Communist Manifesto, of course, and he wrote a book, something to do with private property in the state or something like that. And he talked about it was essential to get women into the workforce, but to liberate them, which would then lead to the next step would be to require the destruction of the family unit, and that's why a lot of the private property and ownership and inheritance comes from. So, I mean, okay, it wasn't just about those two guys back those days, their ideas, but there's an awful lot of crossover here. When you hear people talking about encroaching on people's private property or wealth, and that's a bad thing, and they want to take for the common good, people better watch out, basically. Absolutely.
Yep.
So the UN
and
again.
Then we have these are the SDGs. This is the policy framework that is driving everything that we're seeing around us. People don't know whether to look to the left or look to the right, but really they just need to look up at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There's the 17 of them right there. Education is one, gender equity, all of it is right there. There's also a document called the United Nations Migration Replacement. So all of these, the Irish birth level is below replacement level at the moment. So it's at like 1.2. It has to be over 2. So if the Irish birth rate stays this low, the Irish race will not be replaced. It will be wiped out. But there's the UN migration replacement document. So it's not by chance that we're getting our borders flooded. It's all part of this. And I always say it's like an iPhone. You have your phone, right? You go to bed at night and you wake up in the morning and there's been a system reboot or an upgrade to your iPhone, but you're like, well, the phone on the outside looks the same. Everything looks the same, but it all got replaced on the inside. So these sustainable development goals are like the iPhone reboot where the country looks the same. People don't know what's happening, but these policies are rewriting all of the policies now without the consent of the Irish people. It's like a soft coup is going on.
Absolutely, yeah. Like this whole creeping communism thing, and
Hmm.
like you said it there, it's if to make a link between what we're looking at now and what we've been talking about. I believe that a lot of the educational templates that are affecting Ireland and other Western countries are coming from is it UNESCO? I think is that true?
Absolutely. And in our Connect Ed guide that you had up earlier, for anyone just tuning in, it's under naturalwomen'scouncil.com, and the under campaigns, there's Connect Ed, there's the guide. In that guide, there's a UNESCO and the WHO, all the documents there. You can click and open that guide. So the UNESCO is definitely heavily impacting education. Absolutely.
Yeah, and as well, and what makes it so dangerous as well is that this organization clearly, I always talk about the UN actually when I talk about if people want evidence that, a Marxist sentiment or revolutionary sentiment and so on is not just fringe groups, like your political left groups that are on the outside of government, like People Before Profit or whatever. Okay, sometimes the Greens or activists, whatever, outside of government and so on, usually. But I like to talk about the UN because they seem to be pushing all of these Marxist initiatives right across the board. It ties into the lack of borders, the climate movement, breaking down the difference between genders, and as well, just as a quick segue, like I always say now, I think the magic bullet to understanding Marxism is they're trying to create a better society where there's no oppression. And they believe that hierarchies lead to oppression. So how they solve the problem is by removing the hierarchy. They try to force equality and uniformity across the board. They try to remove the genders. They try to remove the borders. They try to remove the difference between rich and poor. And this stuff is evil. The SDG, as well as the ESG initiatives in the corporations as well, to make a link for the viewers, trying to coerce companies to go along with Marxism. If they don't, they're penalized,
Yeah, there's the corporate index. They get their points on how well they do with all this DEI. And then even in the universities, it's worth mentioning that there's in the third level, if the third level universities don't put in all of this DEI, they will not get grants. Athena Swan has infected universities, and they will stop these universities from getting grants if they don't hit their DEI goals. So they're captured because it's due to money. But a lot of companies we saw, particularly the big global ones, a lot of them have pulled out of the DEI. They are not sponsoring the Pride. They've pulled out of DEI. We saw what happened in the US. The US administration has defunded the WHO. They have gone out and stated that the climate is a big hoax. We all know, well, many people know, I should say, that the whole climate alarmism is really nothing to do with keeping the world clean and green. This climate agenda is about control and surveillance.
Yes.
So it's about, how often you can drive your car, living in a 15-minute smart city, carbon credits, and what you can eat. It tracks everything to do with your life, but it's all under the guise of a clean, green planet. But that's not what it's to do with. If you look through the layers and do the research, it's all about control and surveillance. The same with digital ID. Right now in Ireland, they are trying to roll out the digital ID, weaponizing the children by making parents believe that children should not be on the internet and under 16 should not be on social media. We have to keep the children safe. Forget about what's in the school books and libraries, but we'll just tell parents we care about the kids and have to keep them safe online. But that will be an age verification system. So it's about keeping your kids safe. But if our child needs an age verification system, guess who else needs one? You and I. And then it's age verification. And then it's, a digital wallet to keep all of your documents for convenience. And then it's tracking, control, surveillance. So all of your life trail will be on your digital ID, your vaccination status. Could be how often you drive your car, what you eat, how you shop. Every single transaction in your life will be stored on this digital cloud. And if you're not a good little boy or girl, it could be switched off. Let's not forget what happened to those Canadian truckers.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And while you were talking there, I just thought about if people want to see what's coming down the tracks for Western countries, they can just take a look at what's happening in China. You know, under the Chinese Communist Party, they have the social credit system, which is kind of like, you know, we were talking about ESG for companies, but the social credit system is for individuals. If you don't go along with the way they want to do things, they kind of, you know, you're denied rights, the rights to start a business or to get a new place or whatever it is, and you're kind of blacklisted and socially ostracized. And if people go even harder against the system, they end up getting thrown into prison. It's really incredible what's going on there. But I'm sure you heard, you know, the ESG stuff. It makes me laugh. One of the signs that it was clearly political was that Elon Musk, who is known as the EV guy, he's like the Tesla guy for green vehicles and so on. I think Tesla didn't have a great score at one point because he openly criticized some of the political left. And interestingly, like companies like Ford and Toyota, who produce these, you know, 3 liter plus diesel guzzling petrol and diesel vehicles and so on, SUVs, got a better score than he did. So, like, it was clearly politically motivated, and you couldn't really make this stuff up, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. And don't worry, because if we aren't good boys and girls in Ireland, don't worry, because Helen McEntee announced that she's going to diversify the army by fast tracking citizenship for people who want to join the military. So maybe all these single fighting age men can have their citizenship fast tracked, and they'll be our Irish army and keep us in check if we step out of line.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was talking about that in the States. I can't remember the senator's name, but he's obviously a left-leaning senator in the States, was talking about the same thing, bringing immigrants in and giving them visas in exchange for military service. And the same thing happened in the UK too, that, you know, similar kind of talk, bringing immigrants again, bringing them into the armed forces, which is a massive security risk. It's like, it seems to be everywhere across the board, these people, they seem to be committing some sort of treason or crimes against their own people. It's really extraordinary, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I don't know how anyone in Ireland could think it's good for people who have no vested interest in the country to have their citizenship fast tracked, for one, but second, to join our military. So, I mean, it's beyond belief, unless they're going to just ship all these single fighting age men out and try to start a war with Russia or something, you know, so to keep, because obviously they need Ukraine to win, to keep the money laundering going, to keep the European Union alive.
Right. And then, so is this because, you know, the way earlier when I grabbed the images off you, they're all from the same document. Is this from the table of contents of that document, or?
That is, there's strand 1, 2, and 3, I believe. Yep. So that just is the table of contents there.
Okay.
And there, this exploring democracy. So again, it's under the guise of democracy, of course, when really what's happening is nothing like democracy. Things are being imposed on ourselves, our families, and our children without any consultation.
Okay, and is this part of the document that's been directed at kids? I kind of lost run of myself. Is this being directed through the education system?
This is in the actual book. So this is the table of contents in that CSPE book, Make a Difference, that we just saw the cover of earlier. So these are the table of contents in that book.
Okay, no worries. Rights and responsibilities
the there. So again, human dignity, human rights. It goes down through, you know, a lesson, what is it? I can't see, my eyes are tired. 26, LGBTQI plus rights. So it's telling all the children about all these rights. There's lesson 18, racism and Black Lives Matter. Oh, lesson 19, the rights of asylum seekers and refugees. So, you know, this is all this LGBT, open borders, you know, racism, all of this stuff in our children's book.
Great. So next one. Oh, there we go. Racism and Black Lives Matter, of course.
Black Lives Matter, have to put that in. And of course, it talks about on an individual level, institutional level, ideological level. So brings it right down to their individual level to make sure that everybody becomes an ally against for all these movements.
And is this as well, are we seeing, you were talking about the term, you know, white privilege entering the political discourse recently, and it's being pushed in the schools as well. You know how I think it was, isn't it Ibn Joseph, or there's some character who I vaguely remember them. I think it's just another black Marxist, because obviously not everyone in Africa is Marxist, but there's an awful lot of people in that continent who are brainwashed with that, and they seem to be coming to Ireland telling Irish people that they're racist, which is quite ironic.
That's
how
right.
it works. But are you getting what about, like, not to go into the ethnic stuff or ethnicity stuff too much, but are we starting to see what I predict, if it hasn't happened already, is that obviously with the DEI initiatives, you're going to see more teachers and stuff involved who are not Irish peddling these sort of agendas? I notice with Marxism, they tend to like to use figures who will represent the cause. So, Leo Varadkar is a good fit for the New Ireland. He was, because he's gay and he's Indian. Is it something similar happening in the education system, where you have like teachers or whatever being put forward to talk about this stuff?
There's certainly enough woke teachers who would be absolutely delighted to go into a class with this. So I don't know about the ethnic groups being pushed into teacher roles or not. I couldn't comment on that, and I don't have the data to kind of show that. But there's one teacher, for example, that his name is Owen Cleary, and Owen Cleary is also a co-author of these books called The My Wellbeing Journey, which are absolutely horrific. They have everything from the gender stuff in there to 7 or 8 pages on detailed masturbation for kids to pair up, kids being taught whether they can masturbate someone else. There's a group activity that Owen Cleary has to pair up and talk about a sexual experience you wouldn't like, including, I think it says, forced, painful, violent sex. So the books are absolutely outrageous. But this teacher who co-authored the books has been nominated as the poster child teacher to go around and do parent nights at schools, particularly in the Dublin area, to talk about keeping children safe online, to keep their health and mental health and well-being in a good place. I attended 2 of these parent nights that he hosted. And on both nights, I got the microphone and I asked Owen Cleary how he can be so concerned about keeping kids safe online when the same content that we are trying to keep kids from seeing online is actually in the school books that he wrote. Well, the room went silent, and I was silenced and told the question wasn't really appropriate for that night and sit down. And then I was heckled. So what he's doing is, it was even at an event in Temple Carrig with about 600 people, with Stephen Donnelly, ex-Minister for Health, Stephen Donnelly on stage. And I asked the question of, Mr. Stephen Donnelly, some of the books in the library are teaching children they can order puberty blockers online, and there's pictures of how to inject themselves. That could kill a child. Donnelly was like shaking his head. You could see the sweat coming off his brow, but he wouldn't answer the question. So again, I was silenced and heckled, but it's calling them out. It's showing up on their doorstep and saying, this is hypocritical. What they were doing to me was so obvious. They were scaring parents to make them think that kids shouldn't have a tablet, which I agree they shouldn't, that they shouldn't be on social media, which I agree they shouldn't. However, their agenda was sinister. It was scare the parents, get them to fall for the digital ID for kids and the age verification. So then we all get it. It's pushing that EU initiative, that digital ID. So although I don't think kids should be online or have tablets or be locked up in their room watching porn, as Owen said they do, I could clearly see that his agenda was different. It was pushing an ID, because his books are so horrific and so highly sexual and indoctrinating that he certainly doesn't care about child's well-being if he's putting that in his books. But that's how they roll it out. That's how they're rolling out digital ID. But yeah, so those teachers, that's just the question you asked. The other thing that's a concern is there was a group of 13 women only committee that redesigned the junior cycle curriculum, the SPHE. This group of 13 women, one of them was Dr. Aoife Neary. Dr. Aoife Neary went into the Dáil, I think it was 2018 or 2019, and she stated that childhood innocence is a perceived barrier to sexual education. So childhood innocence is a perceived barrier. So we read a lot of the papers she wrote. She has her PhD, and Gript did a lot of articles following up after the DCU course. They did a deep dive into Aoife Neary. So anyone listening can just look up Gript, Dr. Aoife Neary, and they can see exactly what this person believes in. Looks like she believes children are sexual beings, and she was at University of Limerick, but I think she jumped ship, and now she's in University College Cork. But she's in this gender studies, all that kind of that pseudoscience. But these are the type of people who are designing the curriculum. So you asked about, are there teachers being put in the class that do this? Even worse than being put in the class, they're actually the ones teaching the teachers at the likes of DCU. They're the ones that are designing the curriculum with the NCCA, 13 woman only group. And parent associations like the Catholic Secondary School Parents Association, they tried to get on that group to help design the curriculum because they represent a huge parent body. They were all blocked out. They asked several times. So parent groups who wanted to get on and help as part of the consultation with the junior cycle redesign were blocked out. But these 13 woman only radical feminists who believe that children's innocence is a barrier, they were the ones that designed the books.
Of course. And this is, I know it's kind of a dark subject and maybe we'll leave it for another time, but there's, like this stuff is getting into the, I heard the term minor attracted person and stuff. They're trying to like normalize this stuff that I don't know if it's difficult for parents to talk about for sure, but I think that there's this stuff needs to be fought all across the board. I won't even go there, but it's just, it's anybody this ideology across the board seems to like to interfere with what's natural rather than just leave things alone. So the trans movement is obviously encroaches on what's natural for kids, and then pushing that darker stuff as well is terrible, isn't it?
Yeah, we partnered, the Natural Women's Council has partnered with the 7 other countries, and we all met in Washington, D.C. in October. And we're meeting again in Wales for a conference that I'll be speaking at in April. So if anyone wants to donate to help for the travel costs, naturalwomenscouncil.com. Myself and Eugene have been asked to speak at a conference there. And the 7 countries we work with there's New Zealand, Australia, US, Canada, England, Wales, and Ireland. And what we are seeing in Ireland is exactly what's happening in all the other countries. Lockstep. There was a school in Australia where a teacher actually brought into the classroom a discussion on bestiality. For anyone listening who doesn't know what that is, that's having sex with animals.
Oh my God.
So you can believe that the minor attracted person, which I'll just say it like it is, they're pedophiles. Yes. Minor attracted person, they're pedophile. Let's not dress it up. Let's not put lipstick on the pig. It's still a pig, and let's not put lipstick on that one. And we cannot normalize children being sexual, sex with children. We can never, ever normalize that. We have one shot in life to get childhood right. Children only have one shot at their childhood. And I have 2 children aged 7 and 10. And when I can tell you they're growing up way too fast, that would be an understatement. I mean, they go from baby to toddler to 10 years old to, before you know it, teenager in the blink of an eye. Let's treasure, let's cherish and protect that very short childhood and their innocence, which is, it's so evident that the establishment, these Marxists, these deviants, perverts, whatever that we want to call them, are trying to destroy our children's innocence. And this will be the hill that I certainly am willing to die on.
Very powerfully said, absolutely. There's clearly no limits to how far they're going to go in terms of control and the depths of stuff they'll go. There's pretty much Satanism, a lot of the stuff we're talking about, for people, without kind of going off the beaten track too much, for people who don't really know what that is. It's pretty much like, against everything that's good and that's pure and that's natural, and it's drags everything down to degeneracy, pretty much turns things upside down, makes male, female, and so on. And obviously the effect on whether someone doesn't have to be religious to know about this ideology or this take on life, but it's certainly destructive. I can see that satanic underbelly in everything that they do. But I'll just move to the next one here as well. So this was is this the cover of the same book, or sorry?
This is a different book. This is the SPHE book, and this is the My Wellbeing Journey one, which is for age 12. So we can flip through some of the pages. While you're flipping through the pages, I will let our listeners know that this book, these are published by Gill Education. Gill Publishing, they had a staff meeting, and we were alerted that they had a staff meeting and sent an email after we asked them for the sign off of their books, because there were so many pages, I think 7 pages of masturbation, the ones written by Owen Cleary. they had a staff meeting because they wanted to tell their staff through a meeting and an email not to engage with parents, not to engage with the Natural Women's Council, because we were pressuring them saying, where's the sign off? Who signed off on these books? Who signed off on these books going into my child's classroom? They refused to answer. So that's just a note about that. The other thing that's very sinister and deceptive that Gill Education has done is after they started getting a lot of complaints about the content they published, you used to be able to view the entire book online. So you could go to the gilleducation.ie website, start to finish online. Guess what? They stopped it right before the really dirty stuff starts because parents were seeing it online and calling in to complain. So instead of dealing with parents and complaints and fixing the problem, they made it so the book is only visible for half the book now because the second half is pretty bad.
Wow. And yeah, they can only push this so far till people start to really get annoyed.
They pushed it to the limit now, and we're going to start something just to let listeners know. We just started a new Natural Women's Council Instagram page. A lot of our followers said, "Look, your podcasts are great, but sometimes we just don't have 30 or 40 minutes. Can you do some shorts?" So we just launched our Instagram page, and I'm going to spend the next week recording some shorts, actually reading from school books. So it'll be like 90 seconds. Here's the cover of the book. Here's the page. Let's have a read. And you can decide if you want this in front of your child. So just quick hits. And we'll be doing a series called the Classroom Report. And that will start this week.
Awesome, good stuff. I was just trying to click on the link. There's an icon for Instagram on the site, but it's not working. But I could add the link in if you send me the link for the profile, or I could just find it later. I can put it in the YouTube upload afterwards if people want to just try to get some followers there. As well as okay, I know it's run by the Chinese, but there's also the TikTok option as well. I don't know if you're making videos that are shorts, and if you're kind of I know the Instagram and TikTok is kind of similar in terms of format, so it might be another option. It's definitely a good idea to I have people telling me all the time that I should get into those platforms more because people just don't have the same concentration spans as they used to, and there's definitely some impact to be had there. But
and this is the one that's Owen Cleary, the name that I mentioned, gave some credit to or some blame to for his horrific content. So this is My Wellbeing Journey 2. You can look at the book online, but again, it only goes up to like 120 pages online. That's right before the really bad stuff starts. But the book has class contracts in there. I think I sent a page on that. People have said there's not a class contract in the book. Like, yeah, I'm not making it up. Here it is. Here's the book. So everything that the Natural Women's Council presents on, we have evidence to back it up. So this is, again, that Marxism tackling discrimination and hate speech, because obviously the Irish are such a discriminatory people and speak so much hate, right? So again, more discrimination, hate speech, pairing up in activities. Again, more of the critical social justice Marxist nonsense.
Look at that. So, there we go. So virtue signaling with the smiley faces, love hearts on the hands, an ethnic mix, male and female mixed in, I think. And then what else have we got? I just like looking at the signs myself. I haven't seen this page before, but when you do this stuff long enough, you notice the same patterns being used again and again. Yeah. Is that like an icon for the UN up there, the blue one? And it's not coming through on the visual there, but there's like 3 icons under tackling discrimination and hate speech. The one in the middle is, I just realized as well, okay, that one there, the orange one on the right, I don't know what that says, but that's actually, I've seen that on some of the educational, I don't know, it's SPHE or whatever. I've noticed this image around. It was actually taken from the New Statesman, which is a socialist magazine created by the Fabian Society, and they used to have images of that represented woke. It was like the human mind with a light bulb inside it. The light, so it's like they're basically telling us that they're evolved people. They're waking up to what it is to be a real human being. Like, this idea goes back to Leon Trotsky and even to Marx himself, that like an evolved person is someone who wants to be a part of the global revolution. It's fascinating. They're dropping these things into just everyday documents.
All the symbols.
Yeah. So they're almost like kind of showing off a little bit when they're doing this stuff. Contracts. What's this?
Oh, there it is. Class contracts. There we go. So sign the class contract. And again, just to remind everyone or let anyone know who just joined, is there's the NCCA document. There's one, how to create a safe classroom. Another is how to create an inclusive classroom. And one of them says what happens in the class stays in the class. That goes for the teachers as well. So again, keep it all behind closed doors. And let's not forget, the government buys the books. The books stay locked up at school. There's a class contract, and there's no mobile phones in the class. So the kids can't record or take pictures of what their teacher might be saying, unless they go in with a pen recording, which some kids are doing, I believe.
Yeah, the sneaky videos. Yeah, maybe that's the way forward to,
Yeah, I think we're going to have to do that to catch some of this stuff out, because people say it's not happening in the class. Well, actually it is.
Well, this thing is, I know you've been dealing with this a lot, and you've talked about this, of course, but for the viewers, this revolutionary movement, they've always acknowledged. We talked about the reason why they want to, destroy the family unit is because, the whole private property thing, inheritance, and another reason why they want to destroy it is because in a traditional family there was the hierarchy between the man and the woman as the head of the family, and the Marxists obviously don't like hierarchy, so it's another reason wanted to destroy the family. But another reason is because obviously the parents are supposed to be the first line of defense between the kids and the dangers of the world, including dangerous ideologies and communist regimes, and they have a long history of trying to be the parents. So all this links back to the destruction of the family unit and getting more and more control. This is really despicable. I mean, what is like, from when you've told parents about this, that there are people actually in Irish society who are trying to get between their kids and them, what's their reaction?
Denial. Complete denial. They don't believe it. They don't want to believe it. It's just too much. But something that I tweeted out, I'll tweet it out again tonight for anyone listening, but I was at the IRL forum. I was a speaker on 3 panels at a fantastic conference that Eddie Hobbs put on. And I was on a panel with Sharon Keoghan, a senator. And Sharon Keoghan told a story that back in 2015, there was a child who was removed from their parents by TUSLA, which is Ireland's Child Protection Services. And Sharon was the foster parent. And the child was removed from their parents because their parents would not affirm the child's chosen gender. Taken off their parents. And that was 11 years ago. And tomorrow I'm going to be speaking with a mother from the United States whose child was taken by Child Protection Services because the mother would not affirm the child's chosen gender, wouldn't trans the child. So Child Protection Services snatched them. And we are hearing about this in other countries. But when I heard it at the IRL forum from Senator Sharon Keoghan, I was shocked that it happened in Ireland. But if you look at the Parliamentary Council of Europe a couple of weeks ago, they voted on the bill that will ban any conversion therapy, which means that if a child or anybody is gender confused, you have to affirm them versus exploring the reason why they're gender confused and, coming up with a treatment. You simply have to confirm their mental illness or psychiatric condition. Just say, yes, Johnny, you're a girl. And it was voted on, and it will try to criminalize parents and professionals. So if a parent or a professional, and that includes a teacher or a therapist, doesn't take an affirmative approach and affirm that child's chosen gender, we can be criminalized. Now, that passed the Parliamentary Council of Europe. It will be going to the European Union, I'm sure, and I'm sure they'll vote for it 100%. Ireland had a bill on the table called the Prohibition of Conversion Therapy Bill, and that would also criminalize professionals for not affirming a child's gender, even though that goes against the, ethical standards of a therapist. That goes against common sense. That defies the CAS report. Again, the gold standard CAS report that says we should not be socially transitioning children, but we'll be criminalized if we don't do that. So that's where they're going. They want to get as many kids on this transgender conveyor belt as they possibly can, be it through the schools, the libraries, legislation to criminalize us, Child Protection Services to snatch kids from parents that don't affirm them. I mean, if this sounds too far-fetched, I can understand why it does sound too far-fetched. But the sad reality is it's happening, and we have all of the evidence and legislation to back it up.
Yeah, it's really there's an awful lot of stuff going on here, isn't there? And it's that thing of coercive control, like the parents. It's I mean, how I know it's probably a conversation for another time, but trying to bridge the gap between that level of denial in some parents as to what's actually going on, and the idea that their actual the stuff they've been taking for granted, like being a parent itself, this movement seems to be trying to take that away. And I noticed years ago with the trans movement trying to, or some politicians talking about lowering the age of consent or whatever in terms of trans operations to try and get the parents out of the equation, basically.
Absolutely. And parents need to wake up, because they will lose their children to this ideology, or, maybe a cult is a better word. They will lose their children, be it through legislation or be it through the child will become so radicalized in now primary school, secondary school. And by the time they get to third level, from the whistleblower interview we did last Friday, which will be released this Friday, so follow our channel, you'll see it first there. Children are already being radicalized by the time they get to university. They are radicalized whereby they don't see any of this as an ideology. They just assume that, 72 genders is normal, or, you can be whoever you want to be, boy or girl, neither or both. Use pronouns. It's all now part of the fiber of their being, because they are already radicalized by the time they get to college. And this lecturer, who's also a psychologist, gave some pretty terrifying evidence as to what's happening. So it's going to be a really good interview when it comes out. But parents need to wake up, because they will lose their child, if not by the state taking them. They will lose their child because their child will turn against the parent. This is putting a wedge in families and causing chaos in families. And this therapist that I interviewed with said that, there's a lot of clients coming in that, the children and parents are now divided. The children are thinking, oh, mom and dad, you're a transphobic bigot because you're not using the new pronouns, or you're racist because you're concerned about mass immigration. I mean, the children are actually giving out to their parents and trying to push this political ideology onto their own parents because of how they've been radicalized in school and society.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most tragic things, and I can confirm that, of course, looking through the history of communism or any variant of it, that there's many cases of that happening where the kids come back from school and they're saying, their parents might be Christian, they come home and say religion is oppressive. It's, or they might be talking about a patriarchy or about capitalism is evil, showing these markers of Marxist indoctrination. And it's terrible because, as I always say, it depends. Certain situations can be tragic, but like we talked about earlier, that's why they're trying to get them at younger and younger ages. They may never recover from this. Like, okay, even if 30% of all the kids being indoctrinated stay full-on activists, it's a real problem for society, And just to kind of wrap things up here then, Jana, anything else you would like to add? And I suppose just to pitch a question at you, what's the solution going forward? I know it's a broad question, but social pressure, trying to increase numbers, trying to get more and more people aware of this and being against it, that would be a good starting point, wouldn't it?
Yeah, what do we do and what are the solutions? Well, we have 40,000 leaflets for our new campaign on the street. We have funding to print another 20,000. We just have to make a few tweaks to the leaflet. We take our feedback from the streets, and some people said, well, the leaflet, maybe some of the language was a little abstract and academic. And if you don't have a clue what's going on, it doesn't quite make sense. So you need to spell it out a bit more. So we're taking that feedback on board. We're going to redo the leaflet a little bit. So there's going to be 60,000 out there then. I would say, what can a parent do? So people who have been listening may feel overwhelmed and think, oh no, my child is attending an indoctrination camp, not a school. What can I do? Well, kids are going to get it in the neck in school, libraries, from their friends, if they're on social media. They cannot avoid this ideology and this Marxism. It has infected every part of society. So what you can do at home, raising good, strong, healthy kids starts at the kitchen table. So, maybe you're a family where both parents work and you might only see your child 1 or 2 hours a day. Make sure when you see your child that you spend time with them, that you talk to them. If they're older and they can, understand different views, maybe political views that they're being taught in school, the therapist I interviewed said that what worked really well for him and his daughter is he was able to show her different views, different pieces of news, different YouTube clips to let her see the cracks in them. Let the kids see there's actually more than one view. So you're teaching them how to be real critical thinkers, teaching them how to think, not what to think. So I guess spend time with your children, try to keep them off the screens and the tablets, have good quality conversations, teach them that it's okay to challenge things that don't make sense and to be a dissenting voice. That's really how to build strong kids at home. Teach them right from wrong. Give them structure. Kids need boundaries. You're not your child's pal. You're not their buddy. You're their mother and father. So it's time to start being a mother and a father. Don't try to be their pal and their buddy. They need boundaries, structure, discipline, and a good schedule. Take them, if you're a Christian, take them to mass, make sure they get to bed at a reasonable hour, make sure they eat healthy, all just those basic things. And don't trust the state blindly.
Yes.
The schools are now feeding children. So there's these hot lunches, which I'll go on about that another day. I've done podcasts on it, the muck they're feeding kids in these hot lunches. But anyway,
Not surprised, yeah.
The school is feeding the children. The school is vaccinating the children. The school is telling them they can be boy, girl, neither or both. They're brainwashing them. The parent gets 1 or 2 hours with the kids. So make that time precious. Teach them right from wrong. But also what you can do is ask to see all your children's school books, online toolkits. As a parent, you have every right to see everything your children is exposed to. So ask the school to see that. To support my child's learning journey, I'd like to see all of the books and toolkits that they'll be using. See what you think about them. And if anything contradicts with your moral conscience, write a letter and say, I don't want my children exposed to this. Opt them out. That's your parental right. So don't feel bad about asserting your parental rights. Your children belong to you. They don't belong to the state. So I think it's just that. And then the advice I have to everybody is to help spread awareness, because many parents are too busy to even look at the books. They don't know what's going on. When they hear about it, they think, oh, that's a conspiracy. It's these far right groups. This is extremist, They're brainwashed by RTE. Well, look at the books yourself. Look at the books yourself. Don't trust me. Look at the books for yourself. But I always encourage everyone to have 5 a day. And that's 5 conversations a day. So you could be at the barber shop, taking your little boy for a haircut. You could be in the post office, the food shop, wherever it is. Just have those small conversations. Like, what do you think about what's happening in schools? And someone may say, I have no idea. Oh, you haven't seen the school books? Did you not see in the school books they're teaching kids they can be a boy, girl, neither or both? They're like, really? I'm like, yeah. And sometimes I even show them a school book or show them where to find it. Say, well, actually go on to naturalwomen'scouncil.com and go to the Connect Ed guide. There's quotes from the books on there. So just having those little conversations. Don't be afraid to talk. If people continue to be afraid to think and people continue to be afraid to talk, at the end of the day, it's the children who suffer. So park your own fears, park your own pride, get out there and have a conversation, because it's not about you, it's about your children.
Brilliant stuff. Well done, Jana. Great speaking to you tonight. I mean, there's so much to talk about. I think we covered quite a lot of ground. I suppose those of us who are kind of swimming around in this stuff, we got to strike that balance between getting as much information out there as we can and not overwhelming people. And like you said, there's certain blocks that people have to get over. But you hit the nails on the head there, teaching them right and wrong, and teaching them that there is definitely an agenda of control, and that this is not the time for people to switch off and hope things are going to just work out okay. There needs to be a certain amount of vigilance to keep our kids safe from all this stuff. But thanks very much, Jana. I appreciate everything that you do, and I'll make sure I've got all the links up as well in the uploads afterwards, and make sure we help to get the message out there. And I wish you the best with everything with your endeavors and so on.
That's great. Thanks for having me on, and I would ask everyone to share this information far and wide. So thanks very much for that, Emmett.
No problems. I'll speak to you in 2 minutes. I'm just going to close out the show here. 1 second. Okay, folks, thanks very much for watching. I appreciate you joining in, and all the comments earlier. I appreciate that too. All the reposts really helps. Apologies for the little tech hiccups earlier. I was biting off more than I could chew with Telegram, but all's well. The uploaded versions will be on YouTube and across the different platforms too. So make sure you follow Jan on X. It's at JK Lunden. The other one is at Natural Women's IE. The links will be down below for that as well. So thank you very much, folks. Good night. I will see you soon. The next one, next interview is probably next Monday night with a special guest. So This is the audiobook version of Red Pandemic, The Global Marxist Cult by Emmett Connor, published by Omnia Veritas, narrated by Emmett Connor. Visit www.resolvingor.com for more information. The publisher's website is www.omnia-veritas.com. Red Pandemic, The Global Marxist Cult. Recording 1. Preface. We can see that the world has been undergoing profound, extraordinary changes in recent times. We've also seen that these colossal changes are not merely circumstantial or the result of some sort of organic societal evolution or other factors beyond humanity's control, but changes that have been encouraged and supported by certain motivated movements, organizations, and individuals. In 2020, we saw the COVID pandemic become a universally life-changing event, a situation that impacted virtually the population of the whole world. The Black Lives Matter protests and riots of the same year dominated the headlines in the Western world, creating repercussions in many countries, though most intensely and predictably in the US. We've seen the climate alarmist movement gain even more momentum. We'd been told that going green is so crucial that if it's not achieved, will lead to inevitable global catastrophe unless immediate action is taken. This seemingly applies even in countries whose carbon dioxide output is comparatively infinitesimal in the global scheme of things, such as Ireland. We have seen massive changes being pushed in matters of sex, sexuality, gender and relationships, and not just involving adults, but bizarrely adolescents and children. There has been an intensification of the LGBTQ movement and the proliferation of trans rights organizations. The so-called Pride marches have been a regular feature on the streets of many of the world's cities. We have also seen a disturbing emphasis on the issue of paedophilia from some quarters, and not a hardening on the issue, as any reasonable person would subscribe to, but actually a softening, a normalization. It's strange that something which has been previously regarded by many as a mental illness or just downright evil is now being suggested by some as being basically just another form of sexual orientation. Mass immigration has been a very divisive and impactful issue worldwide, in Europe in particular. However, it has not been a two-way street. It is overwhelmingly the mass movement of people mostly from third world areas into generally more prosperous, stable and civilized Western countries. This was sometimes packaged as being a reasonable, natural organic movement of large amounts of people from one area to another. Yet it is encouraged, promoted, coordinated and justified by the establishment at a national level and also by international conglomerate organizations such as the United Nations and the European Union. It has also been packaged as a movement of refugees from war-torn areas, but this is clearly untrue for the majority of the masses considering the sheer numbers and non-war-torn countries of origin in question. Others reasonably retort that these are economic migrants coming for a better life in the West. There has also been an increase in anti-white rhetoric. At first glance, it's most apparent in the US, thanks to the English-speaking West's interest in American affairs. But this racist rhetoric is also present in other parts of the world in varying degrees. Some countries are undergoing changes more drastically than others. Ireland, a country that is relatively geographically isolated compared to the rest of Europe, and previously regarded as being Christian Catholic and traditional to a degree, has seen change at an alarming rate. There were noticeable constitutional referendums to change the law on gay marriage and abortion, and the changes are still coming. Considering the speed at which that country is being transformed, it's almost as if it's being forced to catch up with others, as it was not becoming progressive quickly enough. Looking at world events, we could merely say that not everyone agrees with these changes, but this is a massive understatement. Indeed, there's a growing movement of individuals from all over the world who are objecting to or actively opposing this global revolution. In fact, once we put all the distractions to one side, we can see that what's transpiring is nothing less than conflict between those who welcome these colossal changes, this revolution, and those who do not. That most primary question of why must be asked. Why are these changes happening? And why are they happening now in this time and in relatively quick succession? Why so much revolutionary activist mentality? Why so many divisions between different groups and in society in general? Why are so many of these groups claiming oppression of some kind? Why do we hear all this talk of social justice? Why is it that often, whenever you want to express an opinion that is not politically correct in public, you expect immediate contradiction almost by default? Why is it that eventually even the mere thought of expressing an idea like this can often make one feel uncomfortable? Why does political correctness now seem to be a cornerstone of society that our behaviours must comply with? Why can non-compliance often result in dire consequences for those who contradict this status quo? Why are we seeing an intensification of the phenomenon of virtue signalling? Why is this behaviour the go-to behaviour of anyone in a position of influence in our world? Why are we observing it to a nauseating degree and frequency? Are those who engage in virtue signalling actually exceptional human beings, as they would like us to believe? Or are there other reasons why they are behaving like this? Why is it that the state apparatus in Western countries insists that we engage in pathological altruism and try to save the world at the expense of our own countries and populations? Why have they been constantly re-injecting this message into the psyche of the masses? Why are we told that Western countries have an obligation to accept a never-ending stream of migrants, even though our governments cannot even manage our countries with population levels as they are? Why is it that countries like Sweden and Germany, who are at a much more advanced and catastrophic stage of migration saturation, have still been obliged to import them, despite these countries now being in dire straits? Why does this suicidal behaviour continue, regardless of the obvious results? Why this extreme dominance of emotions over logic? Why is it that the mainstream media in Western countries constantly show us how wonderful multiculturalism is, and regularly feature foreigners who have integrated into our societies, yet the almost systematic assault, rape and murder of indigenous Europeans daily by migrants hardly makes the news? Conversely, why is it that the killing or shooting of gang members, dangerous junkies and other criminals are now being held aloft by the mainstream media as horrific crimes against humanity if they are not white? Why is it that we are regularly reminded of the suffering of non-white people in Africa or the Middle East, yet government-approved discrimination and violence towards white people in South Africa is ignored? Why are we being told in Western countries to care for and respect other groups, but this attitude is not generally reciprocated? Why these double standards? Where does this blatant, racist disregard for white people come from? Why, if you raise these points, will you be contradictorily and bizarrely labelled a racist? Why, despite the numerous genuine ongoing problems and evils in our world, are we being incessantly told that racism is one of the worst, if not the worst? Why is it that when criminal George Floyd is killed in the US by a white police officer, it's cause for the whole world to take a knee? Who or what is making the decision which incidents the world should be made aware of and get upset over? Why, in a world where there is a death every few seconds, are some being emphasized in this way? Why are our governments and institutions spending time, energy and resources on bizarre, perverted initiatives such as the sexual education of our young? Why their almost predatory and forceful attitude when doing this? Why do we hear things like queer theory and heteronormativity? Why the recent phenomenon of males and females saying they are gender non-binary, believing that they are neither male nor female? Where are all the experts explaining that this is impossible? Why is there a forceful insistence by some governments that children who want to have sexual reassignment surgeries should not have to consult their parents before having their genitalia butchered and ending up sterile? Why are we being told that we must call a person who is clearly male a she, or a person who is clearly female a he? Why must we call others by the pronouns they or them? Why are parents and teachers getting in trouble for calling the young by the apparently wrong term? Why are subjects that should be emphasized more in schools, such as history, national culture, and indigenous languages, now marginalized or neglected entirely in favor of more progressive subjects? Why are our children being encouraged to become publicly active quasi-political revolutionaries and involve themselves in issues such as climate change when they are barely old enough to tie their own shoelaces? Why are we being told that young boys need to be educated not to rape girls, to to combat something called rape culture? Why do we see the weird, inappropriate practice of drag queen story time? What is this supposed to achieve? What knowledge, qualifications, or life skills do drag queens possess that is of benefit to our children exactly? Does trying to appear like a woman, if you are a man, require knowledge or skill? Of all the brilliant men and women in the world who could be presented as role models to our children, why these odd, unremarkable characters? Why is it that open criticism and state-approved marginalization of Christianity is permitted, but criticism of other religious denominations is not allowed? Why is it that furthermore, as is the case with Islam, a non-Christian denomination can be actively promoted and supported by the state? Why this double standard, particularly in a time where the notion of equality is sacrosanct? Why have we seen white, non-Muslim political figures all across the West speaking and acting in fake solidarity with Islam and Muslims? Why is it that any criticism of Judaism or Jews is considered condemnable and anti-Semitic, yet criticism of Christianity and Christians is not only permitted, but encouraged and fashionable? Why this bias? Why is it that we constantly hear terms like equality, diversity, multiculturalism, compassion, and solidarity, and they are always emphasized as being positive? Why are they continuously being chanted like the mutterings of a cult? Why do we hear an almost never-ending list of terms, conversely, that are used as slurs, such as homophobe, misogynist, xenophobe, Islamophobe, transphobe, racist, climate change denier, anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorist, fascist, Nazi, etc.? Why do we hear terms like vaccine hesitancy spring up when the COVID vaccine appeared on the scene? Why do we hear all this talk of hate speech? Why do we hear people using the word hate when referring to criticism? Why is it being used to dismiss criticism out of hand? And what kind of criticism is it being used to dismiss, neutralize exactly? All kinds or only certain kinds? Why do we hear all these people talking about being oppressed or talking about the oppression of others? Why all the emphasis on identity politics? Why do we often hear so many organizations, politicians and media talk about the far right? Why do we hear other terms to describe certain concepts, such as victim blaming and slut shaming? Why do we hear things like toxic masculinity but not toxic femininity? Why do we hear things like mansplaining but not womansplaining? Why do we hear things like white privilege or male privilege but not black privilege or Asian privilege or female privilege? Is it because only white males have all the privilege? Are white males privileged, but black or Asian people or women are not? Or is there another reason why we are hearing these unequal double standards in terms? Why do we hear terms like critical race theory, cultural relativism, and moral relativism? Where are all these relatively new terms coming from? Why does it seem in the last few decades like the world is filling up with revolutionary activists? Why are many of them associated with universities somehow, or are students themselves? In the US, during the Black Lives Matter unrest, why is it that these student activists are so fanatical to the point where they will get themselves hurt or run over by vehicles? What has them so willing to get themselves maimed or killed? Why are these activists, many of them kids, so completely possessed with this revolutionary energy and detached from reality? Why do they seem so intensely brainwashed? Why is it that the US was plunged into such violent unrest on such a large scale over the death of one person when people die there all the time, as they tend to do in other countries also? Why is it that ordinary everyday people are forced to get out onto the streets and deal with these revolutionary mobs? Why are these people forced to do the job that the police or state forces are, in many cases, refusing to do, to stop these aggressive mobs from destroying their homes and businesses? Why do these revolutionaries attack these ordinary everyday people as if they are the problem, when in fact they themselves are the problem? How can they have it so completely backwards? Why is it that the worldwide patriotic movement, which is opposed to international totalitarianism or globalism, is harassed by these revolutionary or rebel groups who, by default, are serving the system they say they are opposed to? How is it that they, seemingly contradictorily, now serve and protect the system? Again, how can they have things so upside down? Why the inversion? Why are all these revolutionary activists basically identical, as if they all rolled off the same production line at a factory? Why do the ones in Canada seemingly think the same as the ones in Australia? Why do the ones in the US use the same terminology and catchphrases as the ones in Ireland? Why do the ones in New Zealand act the same as the ones in Sweden? Whether you are in Toronto or Tokyo, Perth or Portland, London or Los Angeles, Stockholm or Stanley, Dublin or Dubai, Cape Town or Canberra, Amsterdam or Aberdeen, Seattle or Seville, Paris or Prague, Moscow or Monaco, Rome or Reykjavik, San Paulo or San Francisco, Santiago or San Jose, Edmonton or Edinburgh, Berlin or Beijing, Buenos Aires or Bangkok, New York or New Delhi, Chicago or Shanghai, Washington or Wellington, Helsinki or Hell's Kitchen, why are these people all virtually identical in their attitudes, behaviour and speech? How can this be, despite all the varieties of locations, languages and cultures? Why are they so undiverse? Why do they all have the same views and promote the same agendas? Why do they all call people who don't agree with them racists, fascists and Nazis, etc., and with the same level of animosity? Why is it that the mainstream media in Ireland is behaving the same way, more or less, as it is in other Western countries? Why are the mainstream media in the UK, Canada, Australia, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Sweden, etc., behaving in a very similar fashion, albeit with slight variations? Why are they all more or less singing from the same hymn sheet? Why is it that a person can happily tweet, post, publish the most degenerate, dumb things as long as they conform with political correctness? Yet if they criticize PC culture with venom, these opinions may be suppressed. Why is it that some are banned online while others are not? Who decides what is right and what is wrong in this case, and what is their reasoning? Why are some opinions permitted, yet others are suppressed, and what types of opinions are they? Why is it that there's a state-approved emphasis on mental health in society right now, yet we have the enormous global mental health problem of indoctrination coming from the same system? Why do we have this problem of rampant mass psychopathy in the world right now, which the overwhelming majority of experts never address? Why do all these politically correct terms, concepts, agendas seem to dominate the political, social, cultural, educational and media discourse in recent decades, and with an alarming rise of saturation in those areas? Why is it that we cannot even look at a newspaper or turn on the TV or radio without being constantly reminded of them? These things we apparently must focus on, climate change, social justice, inequality, racism, etc. Are they serious issues we should be genuinely concerned about, or are we being told to focus on them for other reasons? Why are all these issues and behaviours manifesting globally and almost simultaneously, as if coordinated? Why does it seem like we are living in this zombie apocalypse where we have brainless millions who are unable to form their own opinions and who all think, speak and act the same way? Why are we experiencing this pandemic of crazy, coordinated, civilization-destroying behaviour as if we are dealing with a massive global cult? This was the audiobook version of Red Pandemic, The Global Marxist Cult by Emmett Connor, published by Omnia Veritas. Recording 1, Preface, narrated by Emmett Connor. Visit www.resolvingor.com for more information. The publisher's website is www.omnia-veritas.com. This is the audiobook version of Red Pandemic, The Global Marxist Cult by Emmett Connor, published by Omnia Veritas, narrated by Emmett Connor. Visit www.resolvingor.com for more information. The publisher's website is www.omnia-veritas.com. Red Pandemic, The Global Marxist Cult, recording number 2. Introduction. Quote, "Thus heaven I forfeited. I know it full well. My soul, once true to God, is chosen for hell. End quote. Karl Marx, Pale Maiden, 1837. Only one core problem. The cause of all those changes and problems listed in the preface is a global ideological infection called Marxism. The main problem in your country is not the government or political class, the organs of the state, the police, the United Nations, the European Union, the multinational corporations, the elites, capitalism, the bankers and the international banking system, the bourgeoisie, the NGOs, non-profits, George Soros, the mainstream media, migrants, Muslims, Zionists, the Freemasons, Illuminati, etc., etc. The core root problem in your country, and most others, is that it has an infection of Marxism. You will struggle to find any problematic issue in the world today that is not connected to, influenced by, or originating from this ideology. Throughout society and the world, the Marxist red thread is there. This core problem in your country exists because the indigenous, normally resident people have, or have had historically, a suicidal lack of hostility towards this toxic, foreign ideology. This is the foundational problem, and all the other listed major problems we are experiencing right now stem from this one. The word to emphasize here is hostility. As history shows us, any other attitude is inadequate to protect a nation from the damaging effects of this ideology. Any sort of tolerance or compromise towards it is only seen as a sign of weakness, and you'll be overrun regardless. Any tolerance for its presence is fully taken advantage of. Tolerance for it is, in fact, suicidal for a people and nation. We can see, when we examine society today, that not only is there a lack of hostility towards this anti-sovereignty internationalist ideology, but a disturbing fascination with it. It has become entrenched in our countries to the point where it has become part of the furniture, so to speak. Due to this entrenchment, politely asking it to leave simply won't do. Without an extremely tough stance on the subject, removing it in the first place is impossible. Furthermore, without this strong stance, reinfection will occur as the ideology will inevitably find the weakest points in society, i.e., certain individuals and groups, and use those to reassert itself. This has happened many times before in the history of our struggle with this ideology. Best of luck. To any reasonably free people trying to prevent this internationalist globalist machine from destroying their country, I say this. Best of luck trying to stop it without first sufficiently dealing with the Marxist infection in your land. Once it's acknowledged and understood by a sufficient number, it needs to be tackled head on. Trying to get some real traction with a pro-sovereignty, patriotic, nationalist, call it whatever you like, movement in your land, without first dealing with the Marxism problem, will be extremely difficult. Perhaps no matter how much gas, energy, enthusiasm you give it, you would be merely spinning your wheels. Perhaps freedom could still be achieved without first dealing with the Marxist infection, but this would be inefficient and would be more time-consuming a process than it needs to be. And is it not true that time is of the essence? The purpose of this book is not to examine the monotonous dogmatic ins and outs of official Marxist theory and all the various interpretations. It would take volumes and would only result in one conclusion anyway. It doesn't deserve this type of analysis. It would be like sifting through a stinking landfill with your bare hands for years looking for trinkets. Besides, what difference would that make? It would have zero effect on those who are already indoctrinated. And for those who are not, it would be like, quote, preaching to the queer, quote. I'm aware no one actually says that. Having said all that, I am confident that the message of this book will provide tremendous value, clarity and enjoyment to those with the correct attitude. Those who are able to understand this work will. It's obviously not aimed at the indoctrination types, since they already have their minds made up, or made up for them to be more precise. It's aimed towards those who are keen to put a stop to this global pandemic of madness. As you progress through this work, it will become clear why we should be focusing on Marxism specifically. Whatever particular causes you yourself like to champion, having a deep understanding of this issue will benefit you and those who benefit from your efforts. Or if you simply want to protect those close to you, this work will provide you with the antidote in case they become exposed to this pathogen. It has often been said in recent years, due to COVID, that the world has never experienced anything like this, that this is an unprecedented time. Indeed, these times are also unique for another reason, one less obvious. Never before in history have we seen such a global pandemic of psychotic, civilization-destroying behavior. A key ingredient. Marxism is not the only problem in our world, or the origin of every single problem, but it's a big problem. It is itself, as we will see, the origin of many problems, some of which were mentioned in the preface. If we have to focus on just one thing in order to produce the biggest effect, we should focus on this. By comparison, discussing other things in order to improve our overall situation is simply a waste of time. Since this subject can be, in terms of logic, a tangled ball of string in some ways, we must detangle something before we move on. We must address the this or that psychological tendencies we have when deciding what stance to take on big subjects like this. When the proposition is put, quote, Marxism is a serious problem and we should focus mainly on this, the responses may come back, such as, quote, there's more to blame than just Marxism, end quote, and, quote, Marxism is not the origin of the problem, end quote. This is true in a sense, and some of that will be addressed later, but we must prioritize. Besides, these types of attitudes are unconstructive since they don't allow a consensus to be formed, which you absolutely need in order to deal with the problem of Marxism. So, because of this tendency in some, and those who the reader might interact with, we need to restate the point. This book is not suggesting that Marxism is the only ingredient used in the internationalist globalist machine, or that it's the origin of all the world's chaos. It is, however, highlighting that Marxism is a key universal ingredient that allows the internationalist globalist machine to function at a ground level in our societies, all pushing in the same direction. Additionally, it's not good to have too many divergent or antagonistic contradictory opinions. You really need everyone pushing in one direction. Too many conflicting ideas solutions just negate any possible impact of any one idea solution, and no progress is achieved. Therefore, to make progress in sorting out this mess we are in, there needs to be a massive consensus. Imagine a few hard-working men trying to move a large boulder off a road in days gone past, with no help from an animal, e.g. an ox, or helpful tools. It doesn't matter how many men there are, or how strong they are. If they all push in alternate or opposite directions, it's a big waste of time and energy. If they push together in the one direction, however, that is a different matter. This is efficiency of force, due to them combining their efforts. There are efficient and inefficient ways of doing things, and our collective quest to have some freedom from this globalist monster is no different. If we all want a better, freer, saner world, we must work together on this issue to be efficient and have consensus. Consider also that we are in a world full of Marxist deception and propaganda and demoralization, which is always trying to exploit any weaknesses in its opposition by capitalizing on any disunity within it. Therefore, our message must be clear and united. No to Marxism, no exceptions. Once we get control of this problem, we will be able to see some improvements in our collective situation. The importance of maintaining focus. We need to focus on this problem and maintain it permanently while not getting distracted with other issues. The Marxist indoctrination is always trying to get us to focus and assign blame elsewhere. The religious institutions, i.e. the Catholic Church, the banking system, capitalism, the US empire, the bourgeoisie elites, or the multinational corporations, etc. In addition, we are constantly being divided and conquered by the various Marxism-supported initiatives, or sub-agendas, some of which were mentioned in the preface. So all this divergence and lack of focus is not conducive to building a resistance to this big internationalistic system we are up against. In fact, Marxism is good at taking any opposing energies and diffusing or deflecting them to the point where there is no cohesive opposition to it at all. Another reason why we should focus on the Marxist ideology and its adherents is that this is a problem that we can address and highlight relatively easily in our countries. It also happens that Marxism is the first line of defense being used by the internationalist globalist machine to stop any genuine resistance from developing in society. If the big globalist monster has an exploitable chink in the armor, this is it. A key ingredient of control. Marxism is a key ingredient for global control and a massive causal factor of all the world's chaos because of the elements that make up this ideology. The concepts of equality, revolution, internationalism and one world government, and the oppressor versus oppressed formula, to name a few. These have been its core elements from the beginning, but there are others too. It's important to note that it's the combination of these elements that makes the mixture of Marxist ideological indoctrination so potent. The oppressor versus oppressed formula in particular, and its many manifestations, combines very well with the other elements of revolution and equality. The dramatic, cynical oversimplification of how society operates, championed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, the class struggle of the oppressor bourgeoisie rich capitalists versus the oppressed proletariat poor workers, was an oversimplification featured in the Communist Manifesto that echoed into eternity. This oversimplification, being fawned over since by intellectuals and others the world over, has now morphed into this monster that is destroying civilization, the ramifications of which will take the world to ever more dark places if nothing is done to stop it. To be clear, we are not merely talking about what is called cultural Marxism or the Frankfurt School. As we will see, any form of Marxism, from any point in its history, is a problem for society, including socialism or democratic socialism, and the multitude of other manifestations labelled, regardless of how benign they seem to be or how many people like them. All traces have to go. So, all traces of Marxism must go. If you want to regain control of your country by stopping this globalist totalitarian monster, you and your fellow countrymen must completely reject and hate Marxism in all its forms. We need a strong, zero-tolerance stance on it due to the overall situation we are in, because of how the individual human mind works, and because of the highly contaminated social landscape in our countries at present. Hence the word hate. Having this emotional punch to it will help to generate the required mentality in the general population. The more people feel and express hostility towards Marxism, and the more the ideology is regarded as toxic, the better. Then you will give yourselves a fighting chance. Understanding the effects of this parasitic ideology on our world and striving to be immune from it is a massive undertaking. It has an insidious nature, and it expresses this using a variety of methods. It's an ever-present, transforming threat that has a long, proud tradition of adaptation and subversion. There are several strains, and it's still adapting, even today. In recent times, it has adapted to subvert the patriotic nationalistic movements worldwide. Therefore, the more united the population is in its hostility towards it, the better. Can't a society just be and stay immune? Without this unified, hostile, almost allergic reaction, does the average person have the ability to stay immune from this? Is this why it has been so effective at proliferating and entrenching itself in our societies, despite its horrific resume? Can't a society just be immune without being vigilant? Essentially, can a society have anything less than a zero-tolerance stance against the ideology and remain unaffected overall? These are big, important questions. Considering the modus operandi of Marxism, past and present, perhaps many people would struggle to encounter this ideology without being led astray, being sucked into the cult, as it were. This is not to dismiss the discernment of so many just for the sake of it. This is just illustrating how good Marxism is at wriggling its way into society, people's minds, and making a home for itself there, like any good parasite would. It infects those who are not psychologically immune and then spreads from one vulnerable person to another. The many ways in which this ideology can distort a person's perceptions and start dictating their emotional responses could make it very difficult for someone to be unaffected, especially if they were in a pro-Marxist environment, e.g. an infected university. For some, trying to stay immune in a setting like that would be like walking a tightrope psychologically, trying to stay on the straight and narrow. For some, they may have to choose between conforming or being ostracized, or simply deciding to exit that environment ASAP. Exposure to this ideology can be risky for anyone, but especially the young. We can clearly see how the indoctrination policy of this cult targets the unsuspecting public at younger and younger ages. In recent times, they have been using the insane climate change movement to turn teen and pre-teen kids into little revolutionaries. This is no accident. The younger a person is, the more susceptible they are to being indoctrinated, especially by an emotionally manipulative ideology like Marxism. Life experience, emotional control, and general maturity can help to keep a person immune. And these are things that young people generally just don't have to a sufficient degree. They need guidance and protection from those who are more mature to avoid these pitfalls. And that's where parents and teachers are supposed to come in. Of course, if these adults are indoctrinated themselves, then the kids have no chance. In other cases, parents simply being ignorant of Marxism is enough to create a disaster. This ideology can be pumped into the soft heads of students at any age. There are several other mediums through which it can reach people's minds, and education, academia, is just one of them. However, it's perhaps the most efficient since it can mask itself as education to hide its true face, indoctrination. Priorities. Let's prioritize and put things into a rational perspective from a nation management point of view. Considering the damage being done to Western countries thanks to internationalist Marxist attitudes, is it not a bit silly to focus on domestic issues while forgetting the bigger picture? In Ireland's case, for example, focusing on such things as housing prices, renting costs, crime, the state of the health service, mental health, vulture funds, or homelessness is irrelevant if the country is being progressively driven towards a cliff due to the Marxist ideology being in the driving seat. Is it good prioritization to focus on those things in our foreground while the various consequences of a serious Marxist infection and the various sub-agendas it supports are tearing up the fabric of society in the background? For example, mass immigration into a country, which is due to the Marxist infection being present in the first place, will destroy everything, and those domestic issues already present will be exacerbated in the extreme, e.g., housing availability and cost, the health service, the economy, schooling, etc. By us prioritizing those domestic issues and trying to fix them in a society of ever-changing racial demographics and increasing population levels due to Marxism being in control, we are simply wasting our time. Priorities. It must be noted too that the various Marxist movements in a given country just love to involve themselves in these types of domestic issues as part of their virtue signalling DNA, blissfully unaware that the ideology they subscribe to will ensure these issues never get resolved. Naivete to the max. Why we should say #no to Marxism. Quote, "You can't give shit leftists an inch. If you give them an inch, they will use it to destroy you." End quote. Argentinian President Javier Milei during TV interview. If patriotism, nationalism, national sovereignty, choose your label, is the idea of a country having a sovereign right to decide its own future, then this is a rational ideological response to the internationalist totalitarianism being forced upon our countries today. These right-wing stances generally allow a country to have more freedom to refuse to participate in the internationalist plans. This is because they advocate that a country should have a reasonable degree of separation from the rest of the world, aka independence. This should be obvious to all. Conversely, an internationalist ideology like Marxism results in a country having less ability to decide its own future. Why? It's because Marxism, in general, advocates that a country should be equal to other countries and does not have a degree of separation from the rest of the world. In essence, countries should show unity or solidarity with other countries, and each would be moulded according to the ideology cult. Think of the naive, who needs borders anyway mentality. In addition, subscribing to this ideology, even partially, is enough to ensure that your country is swept away by the internationalist ideological red wave, and this is exactly what's transpiring across the globe at this time. The cult, in general, wants a socialist federation of the world. If a country is infected with Marxism to a significant degree, this simply means that a significant portion of the population is psychologically contaminated by the ideology. This leads to a lack of will, belief, and consensus that this country should have independence and even identify as a separate, distinct entity at all. These indoctrinated types tend to like the idea of the country being part of the international collective and that it should give its sovereignty to organizations like the European Union and the United Nations, all because Marxism is an internationalist ideology. Of course, Marxist apologists might retort that not all forms of Marxism are internationalist, but this is irrelevant. Marxism inevitably leads to a country joining the international cult movement, being swept away in the revolution and losing control of its affairs. Marxism is the most dangerous, almost universal, core ideology in the world today. It's truly global and has destroyed wherever it has taken hold throughout its history. It's extremely toxic for a country. Marxism, or its outgrowth, socialism, is not an alternative economic or political system or a system of philosophy or analysis. It is a cult-like ideology that does the opposite of what it claims. It serves the true bourgeoisie elites, internationalist types, not opposes them. It suppresses the proletariat working classes, not liberates them. It doesn't make a country and its people strong, it makes them weak. Marxism is a country's internal drain on its sovereign patriotic energy. It is the antithesis to true, healthy, natural freedom and patriotism, sabotaging a country from the inside out. Patriotism is the antidote to the globalist internationalism, and Marxism is the poison that neutralizes this antidote by keeping it occupied long enough for the global machine to enforce its agenda on any given country. Just look at how Marxist cult members all across the globe have been trying to suppress the non-Marxist patriotic resistance to globalism in recent times. That's all the evidence you need, really. Never mind what they think they are or what they claim to be. What do their actions tell us? It tells us that they are essentially traitors in national terms. Marxism is international totalitarian control. It is not the opposite to things like the international banking system. It complements it nicely. It is not an opponent to the world control system. It is a critically important aspect of it. It is not the antithesis to oligarchical imperialistic rule. It serves it. This ideology is the focus of this book because it's the common red thread throughout the world. It's the red elephant in the LGBTQIXYZ+ rainbow-coloured, dildo-shaped, gay disco VIP area of a room we are all in. Marxism is the root ideology of the various anti-civilization agendas active in our society. Whether we examine the anti-white Marxist movement in South Africa, or the legalization of abortion in Ireland, or the Black Lives Matter riots in the US, or London, or the mass immigration problem in Western countries, or the economic woes of socialistic countries, or the climate change sub-agenda globally. Marxism is the society-level ideology at the heart of it all. Without the millions of adherents to this red cult worldwide, those destructive, society-destroying movements would not exist. There are other ideologies at play behind Marxism that stretch right back into human history, but this one in particular is the key to combating the chaos. The concept of revolution is still as effective today as it was in the run-up to the French Revolution, as an incendiary, psychologically manipulative tool. The catchphrase back then was liberté, égalité, fraternité, which equals liberty, equality, fraternity, or solidarity. As for the potency of the ideology, you would struggle to come up with a more efficient form of brainwashing if you tried. It's a fantastic system and, at first, difficult to identify and neutralize in a population. Marxism is the core ingredient in the stew of globalist totalitarianism. To be more precise, if this global totalitarianism is an alchemical potion, then Marxism is the binder that holds all the other ingredients together. Without this binder, the potion will not work. So what, then, is the equation for freedom? The golden formula, the skeleton key, the magic bullet is this: the less Marxism you have in your country, the better chance you have to stop this globalist monster. Conversely, the higher level of contamination, the more you will struggle to stop it. Drawing that line in the sand. If we remove the Marxist indoctrination factor in greater society, and we just had the political class and some other globalist fanatics trying to enforce their will on us, they would be vastly outnumbered, much more than they are now. In addition, since the majority would be rational anti-globalist, anti-Marxist people, this minority of traitors would stick out like sore thumbs, as would their views, agendas, etc. It would be much easier to keep an eye on them and ensure that they are powerless. To put it another way, it would be easy to draw that clear line in the sand. Unfortunately though, it's not that simple, and this is where the Marxist ideology comes in. It's the factor that sways things in the globalists' favour. Not only can it foster a pro-globalism mindset in the population in general, it actually turns people into mini-globalists. Since numbers matter, we need to incrementally reduce the amount of people in society with this mindset. This is a book of hate, right? No doubt the brainwashed ones would describe this as a book of hate. This is hate speech, and it's a horrible book of evil, fascist, racist, evil, worthless, evil, crappy, horrible, evil, insert list of Marxist insults here. When we know what Marxism really is, what it has already done, and what it continues to do to our world, this becomes amusing. It should make us giggle at the hypocrisy of such childish, obnoxious, virtue-signalling pseudo-logic. This is like a paedophile criticizing a father for shouting at one of his kids, or like a rapist trying to shame a man for not chivalrously holding a door open for a lady, or like a superficial, narcissistic female scolding a friend for taking too many selfies. Psychotic, hypocritical, double standards. Like red moths to a Nazi flame. Ever noticed how, when someone publicly expresses views that contradict the PC, politically correct Marxist narratives, they attract the bitchy parasite behaviour of the Marxist drones? They are compelled to fly into the person, like moths flying into the proverbial light bulb. They are programmed, through Marxian indoctrination, to swarm, consciously or subconsciously, any source of light or truth. They swarm to try to block out or diffuse the light. Those of us who speak the truth, who speak out against the behaviour of the cult, we are the light, we are the truth, and we will inevitably attract these little red Marxist moths. When we criticise the cult ideology, or its initiatives and effects, we come under fire. We present a threat that needs to be dealt with and silenced ASAP. As this is an ideological battleground, your voice must be drowned out with more Marxist rhetoric, allowing them to dominate. This can involve you being contradicted, debated, or even shouted down. Petty, bitchy harassment of their political ideological opponents is a Marxist tradition, the use of ridicule, essentially. Any threat is countered by collectivist, pack-like retaliation from cult members. This is extremely important to stifle any dissenting opinions to the cult's ideology's various sub-agendas or initiatives, often the moment they appear in public discourse. This retaliation is often childish in nature and can be anything ranging from simple ad hominem attacks to those of a more elaborate variety. It can be abuse over the target's appearance, how they speak, their accent, social, family life, mocking their children, family, partners, etc. Or it can include such things as disinformation, smearing, professional character assassination, attempts to get people fired or otherwise affecting their employability or income, or just plain old lying. For Marxists, the ends justify the means. It's the usual hypocrisy from this cult of compassion, humanitarianism, tolerance, and human rights. Regular reapplication is required. This anti-Marxism message must be repeated until everyone who is capable gets it. The warnings have either been suppressed or gone unheeded. Regardless of what's been said or written before, too many people still fall for the con and become indoctrinated, which is why this message needs to be repeated regularly till it becomes second nature for a society to react this way. In world history, whenever this anti-Marxist message was scribed on a wall, once the graffiti was forgotten about, or in fact, the minute you take your eyes off it, along comes a zombified Marxist minion to dutifully slop on the red paint. The anti-Marxist message needs regular reapplication, it seems. The philosopher George Santayana once said, quote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it," end quote. A relevant variant is, quote, "Those who cannot understand the past are condemned to repeat it," end quote. An error that is committed in recent times is that some don't believe that the horrors of the past few centuries can be repeated in their time. This is a very dangerous presumption to make. If history is not understood, they can and they will, in one way or another. Naivete will be the end for us all. This is a reasonable attitude to have in general, but especially when we are dealing with a dangerous ideology with the horrific track record of Marxism. It's an ideology that is not merely part of our history or that has waned somehow, but an ideology that is becoming more powerful than at any point previously. Magic anti-red sunglasses. Marxism is an ideological program for brainwashing people. Therefore, this is a psychological issue as much as it is political, geopolitical, etc. We cannot dismiss the former, it's of central importance. Focusing only on politics, geopolitics is just not good enough. We need to be smarter and deeper than that and approach this problem with a fresh new mindset. In order to be the best freedom advocates, patriots, nationalists, sovereigns, anti-globalist individuals we can be, we need to combat Marxist indoctrination, and therefore we need to fully understand what we are dealing with here, how the whole process works. Ideally, we should strive to better understand the program, the programmed, and the programmers. We need to look at this issue on a broad societal level, while also carefully examining the affected individuals contained therein. With a new perspective and the required knowledge, we can easily identify who is indoctrinated and who isn't, and to what degree. Crucially, we can also identify when someone is at risk of being indoctrinated based on an analysis of their personality, environment, background, age, etc. With practice, we can do all these things in a matter of seconds. Essentially, we will be able to see who is infected and who isn't, and how much of a problem they will be for the rest of us. In the movie They Live, 1988, the central character discovers that the elites who rule society are actually aliens disguised as humans. 2 words, David Icke. And how did he do this? By putting on these amazing sunglasses. Glasses that show you what the being you are looking at really is underneath their disguise. This is what we must collectively do in our respective societies. Put on our anti-Marxism glasses. This was the audiobook version of Red Pandemic, The Global Marxist Cult by Emmett Connor, published by Omnia Veritas. Recording 2, Introduction, narrated by Emmett Connor. Visit www.resolvingor.com for more information. The publisher's website is www.omnia-veritas.com.